Chapter 693. The longest path in the game was Gaia's strategy. No one had expected that the most exciting part of the Battle of Chibi, the burning the Red Cliff, would end as soon as the campaign began. All of a sudden, the feudal lords on Cao Cao's side were caught off guard. What would happen after the Red Cliff was set ablaze? Let's remember, after the defeat at the Red Cliffs, Cao Cao ordered a big fire to burn the supplies and warships of the Wulin camp. Then he led the rest of his troops to retreat to the dreamy cloud swampland to the west. They got lost along the way. Cao Cao took the road back to Huarong. At that time, the road was muddy and there was a strong wind blowing. Cao Cao ordered the weak soldiers to use weeds to pave the road so that the cavalry could pass. But the weak soldiers were trampled by the retreating troops, sinking into the mud and being trampled to death. One had to admit that Cao Cao was truly ruthless. In the romance of the Tang dynasty, Zhuge Liang arranged for Guan Yu to guard Huarong Road in advance, and Guan Yu let Cao Cao escape because of his friendship, etc., were naturally fictitious. Even so, Cao Jun's journey was very difficult. At the same time, the armies of Zhou Yu and Liu Bei advanced by land and water, pursuing the enemy. Zhou Yu's army chased after Cao Cao's retreating army, while the navy went upstream to attack Jiangling. Liu Bei and Huang Gai's navy entered Dongting Lake. Huang Gai's navy turned to the Yuanjiang River and seized control of Wuling County, Linyuan. Sun Quan appointed him as the Wuling prefect. Liu Bei went up the Xiang River to attack Linxiang, the capital of Changsha. Han Xian surrendered to Liu Bei without any resistance. At the same time, Sun Quan and Zhang Zhao sent their troops to the east. One attacked Hefei, the other Dantu. After Cao Cao fled back to Jiangling, he left Chao Run, Manchong, Wenpin, and the others to guard various places while he ordered his army to return to the north. Apart from the troops he had lost at Red Cliffs and Wulin, Cao Cao had decisively abandoned his weakened soldiers during his retreat. He had retreated in a hurry and did not bring any supplies with him. Many of his soldiers had also starved to death. As a result, more than half of Cao Cao's army had died. Of the 100,000-strong army, less than 40,000 managed to escape back to Jiangling. Cao Cao's elite troops, led by Su Chu, Cao Xiu, and Cao Chun, were the most adaptable. Their cavalry had traveled all over China faster than anyone else and suffered few losses. The one who suffered the greatest loss was the navy, which was almost completely wiped out. As a result, they lost control of the Han River and the Yangtze River. The other legion of Chao's army, Zhao Yin and the other 6 legions, were not in the main battlefield of the Chibi, so they were not affected by the main battlefield. They successfully returned to Jiangling without suffering any direct losses. Strictly speaking, Cao Cao's army did not suffer too many losses. Due to the loss of the navy and the low morale of the army, Cao Cao was not in the mood for war. He could only retreat to the north and take his time, allowing Sun Lu to continue growing. That was how the 3 kingdoms came to be. As such, Cao Cao's first task was to dissuade Cao Cao from returning. Instead, he wanted to use Jiangling as a base to fight Sun Lu's army head-on. Otherwise, everything would be for naught. Just as the lords were making a ruckus, the battle announcement sounded on time. Campaign announcement. 40 lords participated in the Battle of Red Cliffs, a total of 620,000 soldiers. Cao Cao's camp has 15 feudal lords with a total of 270,000 soldiers. Sun Lu's camp has 25 feudal lords with a total of 350,000 soldiers. The China region had 50 participants, but only 40 of them participated in the end. The further the war progressed, the more it was the domain of the giants. Ordinary lords did not have the confidence to participate in such a contest. If they were unlucky, the contribution points they received would not even be enough to revive the dead. The entire Yellow Flame Alliance had joined Sun Lu's camp. Firstly, with Di Chen's intelligence network, it was not difficult to guess that Shanghai City would join Cao Cao's camp. Secondly, the temptation of Zhou Yu, Zhuge Liang, and Zhao Yun was stronger than that of Cao Cao's generals and strategists. If not for the defection of the Siege Lion and Seeking Dragon, the 2 sides should be evenly matched. But now the two sides were slightly tilted. Thinking of this, the expressions of Bai Hua and the others became more and more unsightly. Campaign announcement. Due to Cao Cao's army being weaker than Sun Lu's camp, according to the rules, Cao Cao's camp will automatically receive a 25% increase in defense. Campaign announcement. Based on the results of the nobility and contribution points test, Cao Cao's mutant army will be represented by He Yu Wui, Duke. Sun Lu's mutant army will be represented by Di Chun, second-class Marquis. Whether it was Cao Cao's camp or Sun Lu's camp, the mutant army's military strength exceeded that of the opposing armies. Therefore, in this battle, the mutant army would play an even more important role. The weight of the mutant army was especially heavy. On Cao Cao's side, the armies of Shanghai City, Lingxi City, Luo Feng City, and Wanshu City totaled 150,000 soldiers, more than half of the mutant army. With Shanghai City's prestige, Ouyang Shua would have no problem leading the mutant army. But Ouyang Shua was not so optimistic, because in his own camp, Ouyang Shua saw Yunnan City's Qin Fun, Lingnan City's Ruanping, and Xiangnan City south of Rosy Clouds. The existence of these three people meant that Cao Cao's camp would not be peaceful. Ouyang Shua could not guess whether it was a coincidence or intentional that the three of them chose Cao Cao's camp. Thinking of the impending war in the southern region, this battle became more and more interesting. With Di Chun and the others occupying a province, the number of lords in the China region decreased sharply. The four major city-states became the backbone of the lords. In this battle, the number of lords from the four major city-states alone reached 8. They also had a certain amount of authority in the mutant army, and Ouyang Shua could not command them. In any case, Ouyang Shua's first task was to meet Cao Cao. At 10 in the morning, Ouyang Shua entered Jiangling City with 3,000 divine martial guards and Xiaoheng. It was not that Ouyang Shua was putting on a show, but there were too many people in Cao Cao's camp with ulterior motives. Ouyang Shua had to be cautious to prevent people from taking risks out of desperation. If Ouyang Shua was assassinated, it would be a big problem. In the military camp, Eli led the city guards, while Bai Hua, Feng Xiaohuang, and Lao Ai's 50,000 soldiers were led by Luo Feng City's General Zhou Bo. The two armies began to work together in the military camp, and at the same time, they were also monitoring Ruanping and the others. Cao Cao's mutant army had already planted the seeds of distrust before the battle began, and they were on guard against each other. In the 13th year of Jianan, when the Red Cliff was burned, Sun Zhongmo was 26 years old, Zhuge Kongming was 27, Zhou Yu and Gong Jin were 33, Lu Xuanda was 47, and Chao Mingde was 53. Cao Cao was the oldest, over 50 years old. He was already at the age of knowing his destiny. It was not hard to understand Cao Cao's urgency. After defeating Liu Bei, he wanted to attack Sun Quan without sufficient preparation in an attempt to unify the world. Time waits for no man. It was no wonder that Cao Cao would recite such a sorrowful song at the Red Cliff. Singing to wine, how long will life be? For example, the morning dew, the passing days are many. Generous, unforgettable. How to resolve one's worries. Only do calm. Clearly like the moon, when will it be gone? Worry comes from within and cannot be cut off. More and more strangers, in vain. The mountains are never too high, and the sea is never too deep. The Duke of Zhou spits out, and the world returns to his heart. Cao Cao's mood at that time was very complicated. He had the lofty aspirations of sweeping the north and leading the army to the south. But he also had the feeling that he was over 50 years old and had yet to succeed in his hegemony. The Cao Cao that Ouyang Shua met at the City Lord's mansion was different. The Red Cliff was defeated, and his hegemony was in vain. He retreated pathetically, and his army's morale was low. After a series of setbacks, no matter how optimistic Cao Cao was, he could not hide his dejection. Although Cao Cao's voice was still forthright, he could not hide his disheartened heart. In the reception room, Cao Cao sat upright. Below him sat an old man dressed like a scholar. None of the generals under his command, not even his bodyguard Su Chu, were present. After the great defeat, the generals were probably busy reorganizing the army. Seeing the old man, Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed. The images of historical figures in the game were not fabricated by Gaia out of thin air. Those that had portraits passed down were based on them. Those that did not have portraits were based on movies and television works. Therefore, as long as a feudal lord put in a bit of effort, he would probably be able to recognize historical figures. Ouyang Shua had spent a lot of effort on historical materials. Combined with the information from the Battle of Red Cliff, he immediately determined that the old man in front of him was Cao Cao's important strategist, Jia Su. Jia Su was a famous strategist and tactician of the Wei Kingdom during the Three Kingdoms period. He was known as the Poison Warrior. He had hundreds of ingenious and meticulous plans. Jia Su was extremely intelligent and good at self-defense. He was known as the representative of a strategist. When he died, Jia Su was 77 years old. He was one of the few people who died a good death during the Three Kingdoms period. In the real Three Kingdoms period, Jia Su could definitely be ranked among the top 3 strategists. As for Zhuge Liang, Zhou Yu, Sima Yi, and the others, strictly speaking, they could not be considered pure strategists. In the Wei Kingdom's camp, only Sun Yu, Guijia, and Sun Yu could be mentioned in the same breath as Jia Su. Before the Battle of Red Cliff, Jia Su had suggested to appease the people instead of mobilizing troops to attack Jiangdong. Unfortunately, Cao Cao had endured for 2 months, but in the end, he could not hold it in anymore. He sent troops to Jiangdong and suffered a crushing defeat. Therefore, Cao Cao naturally valued Jia Su even more. It had to be said that Cao Cao's generosity in using people was worth learning from. Ouyang Shua bowed and saluted. How can an extraordinary person be without clothes? Greetings, Prime Minister. Xiahou Ying, who was following behind Ouyang Shua, looked at Cao Cao with a complicated expression, but he did not salute. Who are you? How dare you be so rude to the Prime Minister? When Jia Su saw this, he rebuked Cao Cao. When Xiahou Ying heard this, he smiled and looked at Cao Cao. Do you recognize me? In fact, when Xiahou Ying entered, Cao Cao's eyes narrowed. He was somewhat puzzled. When Xiahou Ying opened his mouth, he basically confirmed his guess. May I ask if you are the ancestor of Duke Tang? Xiahou Ying's portrait was hung in the ancestral hall of the Xiahou clan. Yes. Xiahou Ying nodded. Ah, Jia Su was shocked. However, Cao Cao did not care. He left his seat and hurriedly walked over. Chapter 694. Meeting across time and space was always a touching scene. Fortunately, Cao Cao wasn't a commoner, so he quickly reined in his emotions. He only looked at Ouyang Shua with a trace of familiarity, no longer as cold as before. To Ouyang Shua, this was enough. Why did you come to see me? Cao Cao asked. Ouyang Shua cupped his hands together and bowed slightly. I asked the Prime Minister not to retreat for the time being. Hearing this, Cao Cao's eyes turned cold and the atmosphere instantly froze. After a while, he said word by word, Do you know what you're saying? The burning of the Red Cliffs was the most glorious moment of Cao Cao's life, when he suddenly suffered a crushing defeat. Cao Cao was naturally unhappy with Ouyang Shua bringing up the past again. On the other hand, a glint flashed across Jia Su's eyes. Prime Minister, please wait. Ouyang Shua remained unmoved. In terms of momentum, or rather, the aura of a tyrant, Ouyang Shua did not lose to Cao Cao. It was just that he deliberately restrained it. Speak. What the Prime Minister is worried about is the annihilation of the Navy and the loss of control of the natural strongholds of the Han River and the Yangtze River. I'm not talented, but I've brought 20,000 sailors with me, and they can be used by Prime Minister. Only 20,000? Cao Cao sneered. Although 20,000 isn't a lot, their battle prowess is extraordinary. I can guarantee that no matter how strong the Sun and Lu Navy's allied armies are, they won't be able to break through the defense line of these 20,000 sailors because the two sides aren't even on the same level. How arrogant! Cao Cao was furious and impatient. I wouldn't dare to lie in front of the Prime Minister. Why don't the Prime Minister go and take a look? After seeing it, I believe that the Prime Minister will change his mind. What one hears may be false, but seeing is believing. The ocean fleets were one of the strongest fleets in the world at this stage. Regardless of whether it was their warships or equipment, they were far superior to the Han Dynasty's navy. Everything else aside, just the cannons alone were enough to make Zhou Yu's navy suffer. Cao Cao's expression flickered. For the sake of Xiao Hoying, he finally chose to compromise. Sure, but if you can't satisfy me, you know the consequences. Please. Ouyang Shua smiled and led the way. Cao Cao was an ambitious and ruthless person. He was definitely not resigned to his defeat. Therefore, even though Ouyang Shua's words sounded very mysterious, Cao Cao still did not arbitrarily refuse. Just like that, the group left the city in a grandiose manner. The lord players along the way could only look on with envy. He's still the best. Even a big boss like Cao Cao has to show up. That's right. Hey, I say, don't flatter him. No matter how capable Wu Yi was, what could he do in such a situation? In the end, he had no choice but to retreat obediently. That's right. If I had known this would happen, I would have chosen Sun Lu's camp. Hey, let's not talk about it anymore. Let's hurry up and see if we can get a mission to subdue a historical general. Being able to recruit a general from the 3 countries was a worthwhile trip. Don't think about anything else. The feudal lords of Cao Cao's camp no longer had any hope of winning the war. So, they turned their attention to Cao Cao's generals and strategists, hoping to reap some benefits before leaving. When Ouyang Shua heard this, he didn't say anything and brushed past him. Cao Cao's eyes narrowed when he saw the 3,000 divine guardians. He had been on the battlefield all his life, and his eyes were sharp. He could tell that the divine martial guards were not ordinary. In comparison, even Commander Su Chu's night guards could not compare. To be able to nurture such elite troops, he was definitely not an ordinary person. Seeing Ouyang Shua's mount, Xiao Qing, Cao Cao, and the others were shocked. The tall and mighty Xiao Qing was a bit unconventional. It was impossible for it not to attract attention. With just these 2 moves, Cao Cao no longer underestimated the inhuman army and began to take them seriously. As for the navy that he was about to visit, he was looking forward to it. Ouyang Shua calmed down when he saw this. Jiangling Ferry. Zheng He's fleet appeared on the surface of the Han River using the Great Universal Shift. Such a strange event inevitably caused panic. Fortunately, Zheng He had given them instructions and temporarily calmed their morale. The Han River surface was a bit narrow for the ships. It could only allow 3 to 4 warships to travel side by side. Among the fleet, 3 uniquely shaped sailing battleships stood out like cranes among chickens. On the sailing battleship, a dozen or so British engineers stood on the deck, pointing at Jiangling City not far away. To them, this could be considered as a novel experience. The divine martial guards were discovered by the fleet's lookouts the moment they appeared on the horizon. The Lord has come up. The soldiers were overjoyed. The divine martial guard's signature cloak was too eye-catching. When Zheng He received the news, he immediately disembarked with a group of generals and went to the shore to welcome them. Greetings, Lord. With a swoosh, all the soldiers bowed in unison. Greetings, Lord. Then, the soldiers on each warship lined up neatly and bowed in unison. Boom, boom, boom. Accompanied by the soldiers' shouts, the cannons fired in unison. Such a formation was truly shocking. Ouyang Shua nodded in satisfaction. Rise. Thank you, Lord. Another wave of anger soared to the sky. This scene shocked Cao Cao and the others. Ouyang Shua pretended not to notice Cao Cao's strange gaze. According to the rank of nobility, Ouyang Shua's rank was higher than Cao Cao's. Cao Cao didn't even dare to think of addressing him as Lord. Cao Cao didn't expect that the ordinary mutant in the city lord's mansion would have such power and status. In front of the army, Ouyang Shua was as immovable as a mountain, exuding an indescribable majesty. Cao Cao had to rebirth to examine Ouyang Shua, but he couldn't see through him. This young man seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, mysterious yet approachable. Heroes come from the young. Cao Cao sighed. Ouyang Shua smiled without saying anything. The battle map had its own rules. He wouldn't challenge Cao Cao's position. He smiled and said, "Prime Minister, let's take a look at the warship." When Cao Cao and the others saw the 5-story tall warship and the huge sail warship, their eyes widened in shock. Even the largest warship in Sun Quan's navy was only comparable to a warship of the Bayan. Comparing the two, they weren't on the same level. In the minds of Cao Cao and the others, the bigger the warship, the more powerful it would be. Therefore, Cao Cao believed Ouyang Shua's bold words at the city lord's mansion. However, Cao Cao was still Cao Cao. He was naturally paranoid and wouldn't come to a conclusion unless he personally experienced the power of an ocean fleet. After boarding Dragon Head, Cao Cao had a different feeling. Although Cao Cao couldn't swim, he had studied the Navy before the Battle of Red Cliffs. None of the battleships had shocked him as much as the Dragon Head. On the deck, Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Commander-in-Chief Zheng, show the Prime Minister the fleet." "Yes." Zheng, he nodded and took over the task of explaining. Cao Cao was also a studious person. He pulled Zheng He along and asked all sorts of questions, full of interest. He was also an expert. Every time he asked a question, he would hit the nail on the head, which made Zheng He admire him greatly. After all, the two were separated by several dynasties. Ouyang Shua stood to the side and smiled without saying a word. Suddenly, Ouyang Shua saw Jia Su standing on the side of the deck, looking into the distance. He casually leaned over and bowed. "Greetings, mister." "I wouldn't dare." Jia Su stepped aside. After witnessing Ouyang Shua's military parade, a smart person like Jia Su wouldn't put on airs in front of Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua smiled. Jia Su was obviously on guard against him. As expected of a poison warrior, Jia Su's wariness wasn't ordinary. "I've long heard of Mister's name. It's my honor to meet you today." "Excuse me." Jia Su's expression softened. No one could refuse praise. Words of praise coming from the mouth of a person of Ouyang Shua's status were even more extraordinary. "Mister should know the difference between this place and the main plane, right?" Ouyang Shua continued to probe. "I know a thing or two. It's not that I'm talking nonsense, but in the main plane, my territory is the #1 under the heavens. My territory has an army of more than 1,000,000 soldiers, a vast territory, and a large number of valiant generals and famous officials. Bai Qi, Han Xen, Hua, Xubing, Xiao He, Fan Li, Wei Yang, and the others are all civil and military officials in my territory." Ouyang Shua casually introduced the situation of Shanghai City. The more Jia Su listened, the more shocked he became. Jia Su's intuition told him that this mutant in front of him wasn't lying. "Mister, a genius," Jia Su echoed, still calm and collected. Ouyang Shua, on the other hand, became more and more fond of him. He continued to clarify the topic. "My territory has countless famous officials and valiant generals, but I lack a top-notch strategist to advise me. With your name, you should be able to find a strategist that suits you." Ouyang Shua shook his head. Throughout the thousands of years, how many people can be called a top-notch strategist? As he spoke, he inadvertently revealed a domineering aura that looked down on the world, causing Jia Su's eyes to freeze. Changing the topic, Ouyang Shua continued. "Mister's talent is the talent of a king. Among all the strategists in history, there are only a few who can compare to Mister." "Mister, you flatter me." Jia Su was really able to keep his composure. "Mister, are you really not going to consider it?" Ouyang Shua had no choice but to make his words clear. "Mister, you must be joking." Jia Su avoided the topic. Ouyang Shua sighed in his heart. It was really difficult to subdue a historical figure. Even with Ouyang Shua's current top-notch qualifications, no matter how much effort he put in, he still wouldn't bow down to Mister. The legendary domineering aura of a king really couldn't be believed. Ouyang Shua wasn't discouraged, as long as he got to the point. It won't be too late for Mister to decide when the battle ends. The doors of Shanghai City will always be open for Mister, even in the main plane. Saying this, Ouyang Shua turned and left. Looking at Ouyang Shua's back, Jia Su's expression was uncertain. In the control room, Zheng He was already demonstrating the power of the cannons to Cao Cao. Rumble. With a volley of cannons, the warships that were supposed to be the enemy sunk in 2 or 3 shots. Cao Cao's eyes widened when he saw this. He had never seen such a divine weapon before. Good, good, good. Cao Cao laughed. Chapter 695. P.S. There's only one chapter today. I'll make it up after one chapter. Apologies. Jiangling City Lord's Mansion. Cao Cao had been in a state of excitement ever since he returned from the port. They had to fight again, but the crux of the matter now was how they were going to fight this war. Cao Cao gathered Cheng Yu and Jia Su to discuss the details. As a representative of the mutants, Ouyang Shuo was allowed to attend. The special role of the Ocean Fleet meant that Ouyang Shuo had the right to speak. Seeing Cao Cao's excitement, Ouyang Shuo had to pour cold water on him. Prime Minister, allow me to brief you on the situation of our mutant armies. Speak. Cao Cao didn't dare to treat the mutant armies lightly. In this battle, our mutant army has a total of 270,000. Excluding the Navy, we have less than 250,000. The enemy's mutant army has a total of 350,000, and we can't rule out the possibility that they have a navy as well. That's the difference. Cao Cao frowned. Ouyang Shuo nodded. After the Red Cliffs, Cao Cao's remnant army numbered about 100,000. In addition to the 30,000 that Cao Ren left behind in Jiangling, Cao Cao's army now numbered about 130,000. At the same time, Sun Lu's alliance split into 3 groups. Liu Bei led 20,000 troops to attack Changsha's capital, Linxiang. Huang Gai's navy numbered less than 10,000. After entering Dongting Lake, they turned to Yuan River. As a result, Zhou Yu's army that pursued Chao's army on land and water only numbered about 20,000. In comparison, Cao Cao's mutant army seemed insignificant. The total strength of the 2 camps was still about the same. The problem was morale was the most important factor. Cao Cao's army suffered a crushing defeat, and their morale fell to rock bottom. As a result, Cao Cao's army was chased by Zhou Yu's army. In the end, Cao Cao didn't stay in Jiangling for long. He led his army back to the north. A year later, even Jiangling, which Xiao Run was defending, was breached by Zhou Yu's army. From this, one could see that Cao Cao's 130,000 troops wouldn't be of use in the short term. On the contrary, Zhou Yu's army was full of vigor and sharpness. The morale of the natives would affect the mutant army's morale. The feudal lords in Cao Cao's camp had long since given up on the battle. On the contrary, Sun Lu's mutant army would definitely seize the opportunity to seize victory. As such, the difference in strength was obvious. Even with the support of the ocean-going fleet, Cao Jun's situation was still not optimistic. Apart from that, there was something else that had to be taken into consideration. If Sun Quan, who was overseeing the rear, received the news of the great victory in the Battle of Chibi, would he lead the army to the front as reinforcements? Even if they didn't, Ouyang Shuo believed that Di Chun and the others would find a way to persuade Sun Quan to send more troops. As such, the situation became more and more unfavorable. The Battle of Chibi was not just a water battle, but a confrontation between land forces. How strong are the enemy's navy compared to your fleet? Cao Cao asked. Ouyang Shuo thought for a moment. Among the enemy's navy, there were probably only 3 people, Xiongba, Zhan Lang, and Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point. Their battleships were sold by Shanghai City. As for the cannons, he had obtained more than 30 of them from Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo did not know if Mighty Tyrant and Battle Wolf had grasped the technology to manufacture cannons. This was because the technical manuals for the same skill in the game might not be everywhere, but they weren't the only ones. In theory, Xiongba and the others also had the opportunity to obtain the cannon manufacturing technology from other sources. At the same time, Gaia also stipulated that when a country had more than 5 territories that grasped a certain technology, the technology would be made available to the entire country's feudal lords for free. For example, if Ouyang Shuo were to give the steam engine manufacturing technology to Lingxi City, Fallen Phoenix City, Heartstone City, and Black Lion City, then all the feudal lords in the China region would automatically grasp the technology. This was also why not long after England developed the steam engine in Castleavic, the entire country entered the Industrial Revolution. Battleships are comparable, but firearms are slightly inferior. Ouyang Shuo replied to Cao Cao. When Cao Cao heard this, his eyebrows twitched. Tell me your opinion. Throughout the entire process, Jia Su did not say a word. Only when Cao Cao called him did he stand up and say, "My lord, my opinion is that the water route should be the main attack, while the land route should be the main defense. Tell me the details. The Navy is at its peak, so we should go upstream and take the initiative to attack Zhou Yu's navy. It's best if we can defeat them in one fell swoop. If possible, it's best if we can reoccupy Chibi." Jia Su was indeed Jia Su. His thoughts were clear. This way, we can use a great victory to boost our army's morale and sweep away the current dispirited situation. Secondly, we can use Chibi as a node to cut off Sun Quan and Lu's allied army. Occupying Chibi will cut off Sun Quan's reinforcements and cut off Zhou Yu's army's provisions. Only then can we fight to the death with Zhou Yu's main army in the dreamy cloud swamp area. Jia Su paused for a moment to let everyone digest this, then continued. After talking about the water route, it's easy to understand the main defense of the land route. Before the Navy occupies Chibi, it's best for our main army to stay in Jiangling City to rest and defend. Firstly, the army can take this opportunity to rest and recover from their injuries. Secondly, we can also take this opportunity to transfer troops from all over Jingzhou to reinforce Jiangling City. Most importantly, we should take advantage of this time to replenish our provisions. During the Battle of Chibi, Cao Cao's army used Chibi as their base camp. Most of their provisions were transported there. In the end, a huge fire burned all of the provisions. The last years of the Eastern Han Dynasty could not compare to the wilderness of the main plain. Every year of war, the common people were miserable and homeless. Coupled with the large number of young men conscripted into the army, there were few men in the villages. Large tracts of land were barren and uncultivated. Thus, to the army, provisions were even more precious. If they wanted to gather provisions for the next battle, they would have to work hard for more than half a year. Because of this, Xiahou Dun, Zhong Yao, and the other ministers who guarded the rear were also the heroes behind the scenes. In addition, it was already midwinter, and the common people only had a little food left for the winter. If they wanted to gather provisions again, it would naturally be even more difficult. In history, Cao Cao's decision to retreat was not without reason. Jia Su's analysis could be said to be to the point, every word a gem. Ouyang Shuo's eyes flickered when he heard this. Without a doubt, a strategist like Jia Su was the talent that Ouyang Shuo lacked the most. If they really don't obey, I might just kidnap them. Ouyang Shuo's heart was already filled with evil thoughts. Cao Cao did not directly express his stance. He turned to look at Chengyu and asked, "Zhongde, what do you think?" Chengyu was one of Cao Cao's 5 strategists. After Guoji's death, he became the #1 strategist in Cao Cao's camp. At the same time, Chengyu was the only one among the 5 strategists who had the ability to lead troops into battle. Speaking of this, there was another story. In history, after Cao Cao's great defeat at the Red Cliffs, he once cried out, "If only I were filial, I would not have suffered such a great loss." Some people interpreted this as Cao Cao being dissatisfied with Chengyu, Jia Su, and the other strategists. In reality, that was not the case. If one carefully read through the historical records, one would find that during the Battle of Red Cliffs, Cao Cao's strategists did not fail in their duties. Previously, Jia Su had suggested that they should not advance rashly and should first stabilize the people of Jingzhou. In the end, Cao Cao did not listen and was anxious to unify the world. Chengyu had long predicted that Sun Quan and Lu would form an alliance. He said, "Sun Quan is newly ascended and has yet to be feared by the sea. On the other hand, Grandmaster Cao is unrivaled in the world. When he first established Jingzhou, his name shook the world. Although Sun Quan is resourceful, he cannot resist alone. Liu Bei, on the other hand, has a heroic reputation. Guan Yu and Zhang Fei are both enemies of 10,000 men. Sun Quan will definitely help them defend against our army. Looking back, his words were indeed spot on. If Cao Cao had listened to Cheng Yu's advice and made preparations, he would not have been caught unprepared by Zhou Yu at the Red Cliffs. As such, it was not difficult to understand Cao Cao's current actions. When it came to deciding the success or failure of his hegemony, Cao Cao still habitually consulted Cheng Yu and Jia Su for advice. Ouyang Shuo felt somewhat ashamed when he saw this. His actions in Shanghai City were much more tyrannical than Cao Cao's. Cheng Yu did not dare to be negligent. He stood up and replied, "My lord, I agree with Wenhe's judgment. However, the enemy has Zhou Yu overseeing their formation, and Zhuge Liang is behind them. In addition, the enemy is familiar with our situation. I'm afraid that they will make some targeted arrangements against the ocean-going fleet." Zhongda's words make sense. In that case, how should we deal with them? Cao Cao was not afraid to fight. He was an ambitious person. Since he had already made a decision, he would not easily change his mind. Instead, he was thinking about how to achieve his goal. "My suggestion is to use speed to fight slow," Cheng Yu explained. "Even if the enemy is prepared, they will not expect us to attack without any preparation and without any hesitation. This way, we can catch them off guard before they're fully prepared." This is a brilliant plan. Cao Cao's voice was very magnetic. He stroked his beard with his hand and had a calm demeanor. He wore a smile on his face, making it impossible for others to guess his true thoughts. He was truly an ambitious person. Ouyang Shuo could only feel envious when he saw this. When would he be able to gather such a group of top-notch tacticians under him? Prime Minister. Although he was envious, Ouyang Shuo had always been very straightforward. He took the initiative to ask for battle. "I am willing to lead the ocean-going fleet and set off immediately to take down the Red Cliffs." Considering that they might encounter some people among the enemy, Ouyang Shuo had to personally lead the ocean-going fleet. Otherwise, Zheng He would not be able to handle such a complicated situation when facing the mutants. Ouyang Shuo also wanted to meet the navy of Sun Lu's camp. It was time for the ocean-going fleet of Shanghai City to make use of this naval battle to prove themselves. "Good." Cao Cao laughed heartily. "I hope that the fleet you lead will be victorious." "Yes," Ouyang Shuo solemnly promised. Next was to discuss the specific details of the battle. Apart from that, there was also the arrangement of the mutant army. After all, Ouyang Shuo was not in Jiangling. They had to make early arrangements. The Battle of the Red Cliffs would once again begin with the confrontation between the navy. The real battle had just begun. P.S. Sheng Xiao's official WeChat account has been opened. Search for Swordsman Sheng Xiao on the account and add him immediately. There will be constant updates of various settings, gossip, news, and so on. Seeking fans. Chapter 696. Before leaving the City Lord's mansion, Ouyang Shuo was prepared to ask Cao Cao for a person. He sincerely said, "Prime Minister, the Navy expedition this time has strong soldiers and strong horses. The only thing we lack is a military advisor. I hope Prime Minister can help us." Ouyang Shuo bowed with great sincerity as he said this. Cao Cao stroked his beard with his hand, narrowed his eyes, and laughed. "Military advisor? Who do you want?" The meaning in his eyes was unfathomable. This was Cao Cao. His thoughts were hard to read, and no one could understand him. "Mr. Jia Su is a talented man. It would be best if you could condescend." Ouyang Shuo would not be polite. Before Cao Cao could say anything, Jia Su's face was already twitching. His heart was on the verge of collapsing. He never thought that Ouyang Shuo would be such a shameless person. The previous invitations were not successful, but this time, he is abusing his power for personal gain. Jia Su complained in his heart. Ouyang Shuo was unmoved. To recruit talents, one had to be thick-skinned, black-hearted, and unscrupulous. Cao Cao did not speak for a while. He stroked his beard unhurriedly. His eagle-like eyes swept back and forth between Ouyang Shuo and Jia Su, as if he wanted to see if there was anything fishy going on between the two. Jia Su smiled bitterly when he saw this. He also knew that his lord was suspicious by nature. When Ouyang Shuo took the initiative to talk to him on the ship, his lord had probably seen it. Now that it was like this, he would not be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. At this moment, Cheng Yu took the initiative to stand up and break the deadlock. He said with a smile, "Reporting to my lord, I think that the request of a mutant is reasonable. The ocean-going fleet is the key to the success of this battle. There must be a wise man who can observe from the side at any time to ensure safety." As he said this, Cheng Yu gave Cao Cao a look. Cao Cao saw this and immediately understood. Cheng Yu's subtext was very obvious. He wanted Cao Cao to take this opportunity to plant people in the ocean-going fleet. As for whether there were other struggles and considerations, no one knew. When there were a lot of strategists, it was inevitable that they would plot against each other. For example, between Cheng Yu and Jia Su, there was no conclusion as to who was the #1 strategist by Cao Cao's side. Therefore, if there was a chance, Cheng Yu did not mind giving Jia Su a push. This wasn't despicable, it was just power play. If it wasn't for Lord E calling me out, I would have gone with him, Cheng Yu joked. That won't do. Cao Cao also smiled. No one knew what he had weighed in his mind, but he finally agreed. He nodded and said, "All right, I'll let Winnie go with you." "Thank you, Prime Minister." Ouyang Shuo was overjoyed. You have to assist him along the way. Don't go without clothes. Cao Cao personally instructed him, his eyes sharp. Jia Su's face darkened. He had no choice but to accept the order from Cao Cao. "Yes, sir." When the dust settled, Ouyang Shuo faced Jia Su with a sincere expression and cupped his fists. "Mister, thank you for your trouble." Jia Su's expression was indifferent as he nodded stiffly. "Good. I wish you all the best." Cao Cao laughed again. When Ouyang Shuo saw this, he panicked. This ambitious and ruthless person was really special. Regardless of whether he was happy or angry, he would always smile. After seeing too much, one couldn't help but feel flustered. "Yes, sir." In the end, Ouyang Shuo and Jia Su bowed together before bidding their farewells and leaving. Only Cao Cao and Cheng Yu were left in the main hall. "Zhonda, what do you think when he said to don't go without clothes on the ship?" Cao Cao's words sounded like he was talking to himself, but it also sounded like he was asking a question. The smile on his face had long disappeared. Cheng Yu's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, but he chose to remain silent. Cao Cao wasn't going to let him go. Cheng Yu's expression stiffened. He braced himself and said, "I'm afraid it was just a casual conversation." In the end, Cheng Yu was still a righteous person. He didn't take the opportunity to add insult to injury. Perhaps. Cao Cao's tone was uncertain. He stood up and left the main hall, leaving Cheng Yu alone to ponder over the matter. The huge main hall instantly fell silent. After leaving the city lord's mansion, Ouyang Shuo returned to the military camp. He met up with Bai Hua and the others and gave them some instructions. This time, south of Rosy Clouds, Qin Feng and the others probably have ulterior motives for choosing Cao Cao's side. After I leave, don't let your guard down on them. Don't let your guard down. Ouyang Shuo felt that it was unusual for them to choose Cao Cao's side at the same time. Don't worry. I guarantee that they won't be able to do anything. Feng Xiaohuang was still as domineering as ever. Ouyang Shuo nodded. All right then. I'll leave Jiangling to you guys. You have to be careful too, Feng Xiaohuang reminded. Bian looked at him with a dubious expression. I will. Ouyang Shuo was rather magnanimous. After discussing some details, they left. Next, Ouyang Shuo began to deploy the troops. Other than the ocean-going fleet, the 3,000 divine guards would naturally follow along. Other than that, Ouyang Shuo also planned to bring along the 1st Division of the city guards. Ouyang Shuo had a premonition that this trip wouldn't be smooth sailing. The division commander of the 1st Division was Zhao Sihu. He was also a general that Ouyang Shuo admired. He was also an old general of Shanghai City. After experiencing the battlefield, he had matured and could take on great responsibilities. That afternoon, the army quietly left Jiangling and traveled along the river. At the same time, the clouds were moving. Jiangling's city guards, mutant army's encampment. Around 3 in the afternoon, south of Rosy Clouds, Qin Feng and Ruan Ping secretly gathered together. That person has already left Jiangling. Is the news reliable? South of Rosy Clouds asked. Qin Feng nodded. Absolutely reliable. My subordinates saw it with their own eyes. Good, I think he's courting death. Ruan Ping's expression was gloomy as he gritted his teeth. Let's not talk about him. South of Rosy Clouds waved her hand and said, we have to hurry up and make arrangements in Jiangling City. Don't worry, everything is going smoothly. Ruan Ping couldn't hide his excitement. Don't be too happy too early. Bai Hua and Feng Xiuhuang aren't easy to deal with. What can those two bitches do? Ruan Ping's expression was unruly. South of Rosy Clouds saw that and couldn't say anything else. In any case, act according to the plan and be cautious. You're right. Qin Feng nodded. The three of them gathered together and talked for a whole hour before going their separate ways. Just as Ouyang Shuo had predicted, Jiangling City was destined to not be peaceful. There were undercurrents surging. Red Cliff, Water Bandits Camp. A week ago, the great fire that lit up the history books had long since been extinguished. The Chao army's camp on the shore of Wulin was completely reduced to ruins in a sea of fire, leaving only ruins. After the battle, Zhou Yu's army took over this place and rebuilt it as a camp. As such, the two water bandits, Red Cliff and Wulin, facing each other, were both occupied by the Sun and Lu allied army. One on the east and one on the west, they firmly guarded this part of the Yangtze River. At this moment, it wasn't Sun and Lu's army guarding the two water bandits, but the navy led by Xiong Ba, Battle Wolf, and other coastal lords. In this battle, Xiong Ba and Battle Wolf had staked everything on one throw. Each of them had brought an army of 20,000, all of them the most elite of the navy in their territory. Even if the sailors weren't taken into account, the number of soldiers in the army had already surpassed the ocean-going fleet. Apart from that, there were also a few scattered naval forces under the command of the two. Xiong Ba was the chief commander and Battle Wolf was the deputy commander. The total strength of the allied army had already reached 50 to 60,000, close to the Sun and Lu allied army. Because of this, Zhou Yu was at ease to let such a large army guard the Red Cliff. At this moment, a conversation was taking place in the central tent of the water bandits. Do you think the old fox will really come? Battle Wolf asked. Xiong Ba smiled. Of course he'll come. You're that confident? Huh, with the same kind of people. I know him, Xiong Ba explained with a smile. Battle Wolf seemed to have thought of something and didn't pursue the matter any further. We've been prey for a few years, he said coolly. It's time for us to be hunters. We can't let the old fox escape this time. Even the most cunning fox can escape the hunter's trap. Huh. The two looked at each other and laughed, brimming with confidence. Ouyang Shuo didn't know that so many people were plotting against him. On the Dragon Head, he was discussing a specific battle plan with Jia Su and Zheng He. Jia Su was introducing Zhou Yu's naval forces. The enemy's naval forces are led by Lu Su, with Lu Meng, Ling Tong, Zhou Tai, Gan Ning, and a number of other generals under his command. There are about 15,000 of them. They're all elites. Ouyang Shuo sighed with emotion. Shanghai City had always been short of naval generals. With the addition of Zheng He, Shi Lang, Yu Daiyou, and Alvaro, they'd finally filled the ranks of commanders. What they lacked right now was a commanding general. Lu Meng, Ling Tong, Zhou Tai, Gan Ning, and the others were all qualified for the job. Ouyang Shuo was filled with anticipation at this thought. Sir, do you think Lu Su's army will still go against the current and attack River Tomb City with Zhou Yu's army? Perhaps they've already retreated to the Scarlet Cliff? Ouyang Shuo asked. I can't rule out that possibility. Jia Su nodded. Just a little. Lu Su's army set off after setting fire to the Scarlet Cliff. They're halfway there by now. Therefore, it'll take some time for them to return to the Scarlet Cliff after receiving the news. If we move quickly, we'll have a good chance of catching up to them before they reach the Scarlet Cliff. Jia Su's words weren't baseless. It was winter, and the northwest wind was blowing. It was extremely advantageous for the ocean-going fleet. Jia Su's shrewdness had long since noticed that the ocean-going fleet was far faster than Lu Su's navy. especially with the northwest wind's resistance. The fleet's speed was astonishing. Very well. Ouyang Shua immediately made the decision. Pass on my orders. The fleet is to pursue them day and night. We must defeat them before they retreat to the Scarlet Cliff. Yes, sir. Zheng, he acknowledged the order. Thus, the ocean-going fleet sailed like a ghost under the cover of the night and the biting northwest wind. It was a formidable force that stretched as far as the eye could see. The golden dragon flag fluttered in the wind in the night. P.S. Sheng Xiao's official WeChat account has been opened. Search for Swordsman Sheng Xiao on the account to add him. There will be constant updates of various settings, gossip, and news. Please follow me and become a fan. Chapter 697. The boundless Han River flowed day and night, flowing ceaselessly like a giant dragon crawling on the land of the south. Every time the surging river made a sharp turn, waves splashed. On both sides of the river were crisscrossed, and the weeds were withered and yellow. It was rare to see a farmer looking bleak. The Cloud Dream Swamp in the east was 1,000 miles of fertile land, lush with water and grass, but it was also dead silent in the middle of winter. In the withered yellow weeds that were half a man's height, there were wolves and eagles hovering high in the sky. In the cold winter, even the strongest jackals and wolves would be hungry. Hunger was the main theme in the last years of the Eastern Han dynasty. A harsh government was fiercer than tiger. Even people were like this, let alone jackals and wolves. In the strong cold wind, the ocean fleet, which stretched for hundreds of meters, moved with the wind. The white sails rustled in the cold wind, pushing the giant warships forward. On the deck of the Dragonhead, Ouyang Shua frowned. For days, the ocean fleet had traveled day and night for 4 days and 4 nights, but there was not even a shadow on the river, except for 1 or 2 fishing boats that occasionally floated by. Lu Su's army seemed to have disappeared into thin air. It doesn't make sense. Ouyang Shua muttered to himself. With the speed of the ocean fleet, they had traveled thousands of miles in 4 days and 4 nights, almost reaching the mouth of the Yangtze River. Even so, they still couldn't catch up with Lu Su's army. Wait patiently. They can't be so fast, Jia Su comforted him. After a few days, Jia Su's impression of Ouyang Shua had changed. This young man was not ordinary. Whether it was knowledge, broad-mindedness, or the art of command, he had his merits. Many times, Jia Su couldn't help but compare him with his master, Cao Cao. Jia Su knew that this was a dangerous way of thinking. Sir is right. This is a competition of willpower. We can't give up. Ouyang Shua looked ahead, his eyes firm. On the 5th day of the battle, the scouts finally sent news. Reporting to Marquis, 100 miles ahead, traces of enemy ships have been found, and they are retreating, the scout reported. 100 miles, that is to say, the enemy is about to enter the Yangtze River? Yes. Ouyang Shua made a prompt decision and turned around to instruct Zheng He. Order the fleet to speed up. Don't let them escape. Once they entered the Yangtze River, it was possible that they would lose them completely. Who knew if Lu Su's army would go upstream or downstream? If they split up and set up a diversion, the situation would be even worse. Ouyang Shua was thinking of capturing them all in one fell swoop. Yes, sir. Zheng He also realized the urgency of the situation and immediately began to mobilize the fleet. At the same time, the order to fight was issued. The soldiers entered the first level of combat readiness, and the cannoneers began to adjust the cannons in preparation for the big battle. During the rapid march, the formation of the entire fleet was also quietly changing. Such skill and execution could only be achieved by an ocean fleet. The biggest gain from this voyage was to cultivate a group of experienced sailors and Navy officers. The ocean-going fleet was like a sharp arrow breaking through the waves. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the enemy's fleet finally appeared on the empty river. Beat the drums, Zheng He ordered. Boom, 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 boom. The rhythmic sound of war drums echoed across the Han River. With the sound of the war drums, the morale of the soldiers was gradually building up. The formation of the ocean-going fleet had been completely changed. The vanguard was led by 20 giant fortress ships moving side by side. Their task was to break through the enemy's formation in one fell swoop with a hard and sharp huge ram on the bow. Then came the 3-sail battleships, moving in a line. The 3 battleships were the killers of the river. Once they went all out, no one would be able to resist them. After the battleships, there were 20 giant fortress ships to cover the battleships and provide fire support. Finally, there were countless Tau fighting ships and Red Horse boats. Their task was to clean up the battlefield and wipe out the remaining forces. The river was narrow. Zheng He thought for a few days before coming up with such a practical formation. On the river not far away, Lu Su stood on the deck with a solemn expression. As the second in command of the River East Army, the real Lu Su in history was ambitious, far-sighted, wise, and brave. He was not an honest man, as described in the historical novels. In the year 200, Lu Su analyzed the situation of the world to Sun Quan and put forward a proposal, which was known as the Longzhong Confrontation in the River East, pointing out the strategic direction for the regime in the River East. In the Battle of Chibi, Lu Su was a key figure and played a greater role than Zhuge Liang. At that time, Lu Su was the first to stand out and suggest that Sun Quan join forces with Liu Bei to resist Cao Cao. Lu Su was the first to stand out and suggest that Sun Quan immediately recall Zhou Yu to discuss important matters. At that time, the River East was strong, while Liu Bei was weak. The River East was the leader, while Liu Bei was the follower. Needless to say, Zhuge Liang was just a young man who had just come out of seclusion. He had neither fame nor status. Therefore, Zhuge Liang's main role in the Battle of Chibi was to facilitate the alliance between Sun Quan and Liu Bei. This contribution was still worthy of recognition. As for the specific battle, it was the contributions of Zhou Yu, Huang Gai, and others and basically had nothing to do with Zhuge Liang. In the year 210, before Zhou Yu died, he wrote a letter to Sun Quan recommending Lu Su. Lu Su is loyal and cautious. He can be loyal on behalf of Zhou Yu. If the general can accept my sincere advice, he can die in peace. Therefore, Sun Quan appointed Lu Su to lead the army on behalf of Zhou Yu. This showed that Lu Su was really a great talent and was not as unbearable as described in the historical novels. They finally caught up. As soon as he received Zhou Yu's urgent report, Lu Su ordered the fleet to turn around and hurriedly return to the Chibi, preparing to join the mutant army stationed at the Chibi to resist the enemy together. He didn't expect that he would still be a step too late in the end. "Commander, what should we do now?" Lu Meng asked. Lu Meng, who asked the question, was also a core figure in the River East group. At the end of the Battle of Chibi, Zhou Yu recommended Lu Meng to Sun Quan to lead the navy to pursue the Chao army by water. However, Lu Meng politely declined, saying that he did not dare to steal Lu Su's credit. Thus, the two of them led the army together. When it came to Lu Meng, everyone was most familiar with the story of Amon of Wu. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. This story was related to Lu Meng. From Lu Meng's biography, we can see his growth. We can see how an illiterate youth became a famous general of Dong Yu Wu. After Lu Su's death, Lu Meng took over his position. One of Lu Meng's most famous achievements was crossing the river in white, taking control of the Jing province, and indirectly killing Guan Yu. Apart from that, Lu Meng had a discerning eye for talent. Gan Ning, Lu Sun, and Zhu Ran had all been recommended by Lu Meng. Lu Sun, in particular, had become the backbone of Wu in the later years and was even more powerful than Zhou Yu. It could be said that Wu is full of talents. If one really wanted to compare among the 3 states, only Shu Han's regime was the most lacking in talents. One had to admit that Zhuge Liang was one of them. What else can we do? Lu Su frowned. The enemy can catch up to us from so far away. We can't escape even if we want to. Moreover, the river is narrow and we have nowhere to run. We have no choice but to fight. Understood. Lu Meng nodded solemnly, his expression resolute. A moment later, Lu Su's army also began to beat drums. Unfortunately, because Lu Su's army was the one being chased, they had left their backs open to the ocean fleet. The river was narrow, so it was too late to turn around. If they turned around in a hurry, they would only throw themselves into disarray. Therefore, under the command of Lu Meng, Ling Tong, and the other generals, the army simply stopped on the river and waited for the enemy to attack. It was like waiting for the enemy to exhaust themselves. In the eyes of Ling Tong, Gan Ning, and the other generals, a naval battle could only be fought with arrows. If arrows couldn't solve the problem, then they could just get close and fight with weapons. Therefore, it didn't matter which direction the warships were facing. As the strongest navy of the three kingdoms, they had never been afraid of anyone. Moreover, they had the prestige of the Battle of Chibi. Even though Governor Zhou Yu had described the enemy's strength in his letter, they didn't believe it. No matter how strong they are, what can they do? Gan Ning's words represented the thoughts of all the generals. They were looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Among the generals, only Lu Su and Lu Meng looked grim. On one hand, they trusted Governor Zhou Yu. They knew that he was always practical and wouldn't speak without thinking. If Zhou Yu said they were strong, then they were. But as for how strong the enemy was, even Zhou Yu himself would not be able to tell. Only when they encountered them head-on would they be able to feel it. Not to mention anything else, at the very least, the speed of the enemy fleet was far faster than theirs, and not just by a little bit, but more than twice as fast. Lu Su and Lu Meng couldn't relax after thinking about this. Moreover, they didn't have the upper hand in numbers. If they really fought, their chances of winning were slim. They had no other choice now that they were cornered. About 20 minutes later, the vanguard of the ocean fleet entered Lu Su's army's field of vision. Giant 5-story ships lined up on the river, which shocked the soldiers of Lu Su's army. Before they even got close, they felt a strong sense of oppression. Heavens, there's such a huge warship in the world. The soldiers gaped. Their morale was inevitably affected. Fire! Gan Ning and the other valiant generals weren't afraid. They attacked first. They were answered by the rumbling of cannons. Boom! Cannonballs exploded on the river, blowing up the warships of Lu Su's army into pieces. What's going on? Gan Ning's eyes widened. He didn't know what kind of weapon the enemy was using. He was answered by a series of increasingly rapid cannons. This was exactly what Su Shi had said about Zhou Yu. While chatting and laughing, the sails and oars were annihilated. We're done for. Lu Su closed his eyes in pain. He couldn't bear to watch the scene unfold before him. Chapter 698. The battle on the Han River wasn't too surprising. Lu Su's army was powerless to fight back against the powerful fleet. They could only take the beating. With their enormous size, sharp horns, and cannons, the 20 enormous warships tore a huge hole in Lu Su's army in less than half an hour and marched forward brazenly. Lu Su's indestructible army was like a weak girl in front of the fleet, allowing the ships and cannons to ravage it. The arrows fired during the battle were like tickles to the fortress ships. Gan Ning, Zhou Tai, and the other valiant generals stood at the bow, unable to put their skills to use. A volley of cannons accurately hit their flagship, causing it to sway left and right and riddled with holes. Even someone as brave as Gan Ning had to jump off the ship and dive into the water in an attempt to escape the disaster. Staying on the warship would only lead to death. Damn it! The bone-chilling river water made Gan Ning and the others miserable. The 3 sailing warships that followed closely behind were like 3 deep-sea behemoths that were spurting fire. They were spitting out cannonballs non-stop and blowing up the enemy warships into smithereens. Flames of war raged in the sky, and debris was flying everywhere. Hundreds of cannons opened fire from the upper, middle, and lower layers of cannons. None of the warships along the way could withstand a single wave of attacks from the battleships. Under the bombardment of hundreds of cannonballs, the warships were reduced to wreckage one after another. There were also battleships from the east that were not afraid of death. They tried to push their own battleships, which were already on fire, into the sailing battleships so that they could burn the ships and perish together with the enemy. Unfortunately, none of the warships could successfully push in against the powerful cannons. Before they could even get close, they were riddled with holes and slowly sank to the bottom of the river. What was buried along with them were the lives of hundreds and thousands of Navy officers and soldiers. Lu Su's army's strong morale and willpower began to crumble under the repeated blows. The giant fortress ships, Bayan, and Scarlet Horse boats reaped the spoils of war with ease. Burning warship wreckage could be seen everywhere on the cold, windy river. The fire burned brighter with the help of the wind. The soldiers couldn't put out the fire no matter how hard they tried. They could only jump into the water with hatred in their hearts to avoid being buried in the sea of fire. The wooden planks that flew out from the battleship covered the surface of the river. It was a spectacular sight. Countless heads bobbed up and down on the surface of the river. They lay on the wooden planks, trying to survive. The bone-chilling river water was undoubtedly hell for the soldiers who fell into the water. The chill in the water was like ice needles, piercing into their skin, muscles, and even bone marrow. If he soaked in the water for too long, even if he could be saved, he would probably fall ill. Jia Su stood on the deck of Dragon Head and stared at the tragic state of the river, dumbfounded. As the saying goes, an eye for an eye. 10 days ago, the Jiangdong Navy had completely buried Cao Cao's navy at the Red Cliffs, ending Cao Cao's ambition to cross the river. Every dog has its day. The previously majestic Jiangdong Navy had followed in the footsteps of Cao Cao's navy. The entire fleet was almost annihilated. On the vast river, there was not a single battleship that could sail normally. In the face of the powerful speed of the ocean-going fleet, they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Some of the clever ones wanted to dive into the water and quietly go ashore. But Zheng, he wouldn't let them do that. The Frogman team had already been ready to launch a crazy killing spree under the water. After a huge battle, only a few lucky people were able to escape this calamity. On the surface of the river, countless bodies bobbed up and down, and blood dyed the surface of the river red. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Jia Su wouldn't have believed that there was such a powerful navy in the world. Ouyang Shua's previous promise to Cao Cao was really true. Jia Su was a little more confident about the upcoming battle of the Red Cliffs. Naturally, Ouyang Shua wasn't as emotional as Jia Su. Such a result was not out of his expectations. What he cared about now was the fate of Lu Su, Lu Ming, and the other generals. In a war, the artillery fire was merciless. Ouyang Shua couldn't arbitrarily order the fleet to pick targets to attack. He only hoped that the vitality of the Jiangdong Navy's generals was stronger, so that they could be successfully captured by the Frogman team. As the battlefield was swept, good news and bad news kept coming. Lu Su and Lu Ming, two of Ouyang Shua's most valued generals, had been successfully captured by the Frogman team and taken to the temporary prison on Dragon Head. Half of his goal had been achieved. The corpses of Ling Tong and the other generals were fished out one by one. The artillery fire was merciless. Not everyone was lucky enough to escape. One could be hit at any time if they weren't careful. Finally, Gan Ning and Zhou Tai, the two fierce generals, were nowhere to be found. Search thoroughly. They must still be in the water, Ouyang Shua said with determination. If Gan Ning and Zhou Tai had escaped, it would be a complete failure for Ouyang Shua. Both of them were adept in the water and had excellent physiques. Ouyang Shua had reason to believe that they were still hiding in some corner of the battlefield, ready to take advantage of the chaos to escape. In fact, it was very likely that they were in disguise. The vast river was littered with corpses, the wreckage of warships, and splinters of planks. It was all too easy for someone who was excellent in the water to find a hiding place on the battlefield. Yes, sir. Zheng, he didn't dare tarry after receiving the order. He arranged for the Frogmen and the Scarlet Horse boats to move out. One was at the bottom of the river, and the other was on the surface. They formed a giant search net and searched all the way down. If they're alive, I want to see them. If they're dead, I want to see their corpses. Following the governor's orders, the Frogmen and elite navy kept their eyes wide open. They didn't miss a single suspicious object or corner. Swollen corpses were pushed aside, countless floating planks were removed, and even the wreckage of the warships was carefully searched. According to the commanding officer, keep your eyes open. Don't let even a small fry escape. It was an inescapable net. In an inconspicuous corner on the northwest side of the battlefield, a pair of cold eyes silently watched the enemy search team from beneath a floating corpse. He clenched the broadsword in his hand. The icy river water didn't destroy his willpower. His slightly stiff body still contained an astonishing amount of power, ready to explode at any time to kill the enemy. He knew that he wouldn't be able to escape this time. Just as the search team was about to approach the floating corpse, the broadsword flashed on the surface of the river. With two swoosh, 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 for lives were lost. This person's broadsword technique was really extraordinary. In his hand, even with the resistance of the water, it still had such lethality. It was really terrifying. The soldiers who were hit screamed before they died. This caused a stir. There's a situation. He's here. Quick, surround him. Capture him alive. Orders were passed to the front line in a messy but orderly manner. The confrontation at the front line was still going on. At every moment, there were soldiers dying. The surface of the river that had just calmed down once again set off blood-colored waves. The broadsword flashed, and life and death were in an instant. In less than 10 minutes, hundreds of fierce soldiers had already surrounded the assassin in the water. In this way, the situation was finally under control. It was only a matter of time before they took down this person. No matter how ferocious a tiger was, it was just a dying struggle when trapped by a pack of wolves. It would never be able to break out of the encirclement. If it weren't for the instructions from above, the assassin in the water would have been killed long ago. At this moment, on the other side of the battlefield, there was also a scream. It's the other one. Quick, don't let him escape. The two warriors launched a surprise attack, one from the east and the other from the west. To them, this was their final moment of glory. They were like fierce tigers defending their last shreds of dignity. Once they showed up, they were ready to sacrifice themselves. Unfortunately, even death wasn't so easy. After nearly an hour of fighting, the two warriors were finally exhausted and captured alive by the soldiers. Got him! Quick! Send him to the flagship. Although more than 100 men had been sacrificed, the soldiers were still in high spirits. Their expressions were proud, as if they'd won a great battle. They looked like a hunting party on the hunt. With such a meritorious service, what awaited them was a huge reward. Moreover, they were the ones the Marquis wanted. Contributing to the Marquis was the greatest honor in the army. Ouyang Shuo rushed to the deck with Jia Su when he heard the news. Is it them? Ouyang Shuo asked Jia Su. That's right, it's Gan Ning and Zhou Tai. Although the two of them were drenched in blood and covered in wounds, Jia Su still recognized them at a glance. All right, Ouyang Shuo was overjoyed. Stay here and bandage their wounds. Get a doctor to treat them and take care of them. Don't let anything happen to them. Yes, sir. The soldiers escorted the two of them and retreated as instructed. The battle on the river had come to an end with the fleet's complete victory. Lu Su, Lu Meng, Gan Ning, and Zhou Tai had been captured in one fell swoop. It wasn't impossible for Nari to fall under Ouyang Shuo's rule in the future. The fleet set sail once more after the battle. Their next destination was the Red Cliff. There, a group of people with ulterior motives were patiently waiting for the fleet's arrival. The road ahead was still full of thorns. Ouyang Shuo's contribution points had increased by more than 100,000 points after the battle. He firmly occupied the top spot on the leaderboard. The change in the leaderboard naturally attracted the attention of those with ulterior motives. The hearts of Bai Hua and the others finally calmed down. The leaderboard hadn't changed in the past 2 days. They'd been worried that something had happened to the fleet. Cao Cao was excited when he received the news. Qin Feng, south of rosy clouds, and the others looked at the person at the top of the leaderboard with solemn expressions. Something flashed in their eyes. No one knew what they were thinking. An invisible pressure bore down on them. The lords of Sun Lu's faction were the most shocked. Xiong Ba, Battle Wolf, and the others looked at the leaderboard and sighed inwardly. They've caught up in the end. P.S. Sheng Xiao's official WeChat account has been opened. Search for Sheng Xiao the Swordsman to add him. There will be updates on settings, gossip, and news. Please follow me. Chapter 699. Yimeng Swamp, Zhou Yu's Camp. Different from Cao Cao's camp, the lords of Sun Lu's camp could freely choose Yunmeng Swamp, Red Cliff, or Dongting Lake when they first enter the map. Choosing Yunmeng Swamp was equivalent to joining Zhou Yu's camp and becoming Zhou Yu's subordinate. Zhou Yu, a top talent, and Cheng Pu and other generals could be subdued. Di Chan was the leader of this mutant army, with about 220,000 soldiers. In addition, famous lords such as Military Kill Ripper and Wandering Spirit were also in this camp. Those who chose Red Cliff were mostly coastal lords, and their armies were mainly navy. This mutant army was led by Xiongba and Wolf Warrior, with about 50,000 soldiers. As for those who chose Daunting Lake, there were two options. One was to follow Huanggai to enter Yuan River, and the other was to follow Liu Bei to attack Changsha's capital, Linxiang. In Liu Bei's camp, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhao Yun, and Zhuge Liang were all there. The lords of Daunting Lake basically went to Liu Bei's camp with the purpose of subduing the two super popular players, Zhao Yun and Zhuge Liang. This mutant army was led by Lord Chun Shin, and Huanggai's army had about 80,000 soldiers. Ouyang Shua didn't know the distribution of Sun Lu's mutant army. Otherwise, he wouldn't be afraid of Zhou Yu's army in Yunmeng Swamp. The 220,000 mutant army was not enough to pose a big threat to River Tomb City. In the central camp, Di Chun, as the representative of the mutants, came to see Zhou Yu and reported the changes in the contribution list. At the same time, he explained his speculation that Lu Su's army had probably been killed. Zhou Yu was silent, and his face was full of grief. "Are you confident about the arrangement at Red Cliff?" Zhou Yu suddenly asked. Lu Su's army was easily destroyed, which made Zhou Yu waver on the previous plan proposed by Xiongba and others. Di Chan braced himself and replied, "Not a big problem." Di Chan also felt that the previous ambush plan was a little too confident. But at this point, the arrow was already on the bow, and it had to be fired. Seeing this, Zhou Yu didn't say anything. "What about River Tomb City?" Zhou Yu continued to ask, without any head or tail. Di Chan understood what Zhou Yu was referring to. This time, he was full of confidence. "Absolutely no problem." "All right," Zhou Yu shouted out loudly, his demeanor bursting with heroism. "The army will continue to advance directly to River Tomb and take revenge for Zi Jing, Zi Ming, and the others." "Yes." Di Chan clasped his fists. "You're dismissed." Zhou Yu waved his hand, unable to conceal his exhaustion. It could be seen that the annihilation of Lu Su's army was a huge blow to Zhou Yu. Lu Su, his colleague, and his trusted generals, Lu Meng, Gan Ning, and Zhou Tai, were in the army. Zhou Yu felt as if a knife was twisting in his heart when he thought that these generals might have met with misfortune. "Yu is useless." A soft moan could be heard in the empty tent. The cold wind whistled outside the tent, making it seem even more desolate. Outside Linxiang City, Liu Bei's military camp. When Zhou Yu received the news, so did Liu Bei. The one who reported was Lord Chun Shin. Liu Bei's first reaction was to summon his military advisor, Zhuge Liang. After listening to Lord Chun Shin's report, Zhuge Liang did not even think before directly saying, "My lord, Lu Su's army has been destroyed. I am afraid it will be difficult to preserve the Red Cliff. The only plan now is to immediately withdraw from Linxiang and join up with Huanggai's army. Together, we will head to the Red Cliff and completely defeat the enemy's mutant army." Zhuge Liang was also clear about the strategic position of the Red Cliff. Withdraw? Liu Bei's face showed some hesitation when he heard this. Just yesterday, the governor of Changsha, Han Xian, had already sent someone to the military camp to express his intention to surrender. All that was left was to discuss the details. This also meant that Changsha was already within easy reach. To tell the truth, Liu Bei was somewhat reluctant to withdraw at this time. He had wandered from place to place for his entire life and longed for a territory that belonged entirely to him. "Yes, withdraw immediately." Zhuge Liang's attitude was firm. "How can we do that? Changsha is about to be taken. If we withdraw at this time, it will be a waste of effort." "Withdraw? Absolutely not." The one who spoke was Zhang Fei, his pair of ox eyes wide. Guan Yu echoed, "Yes, military advisor. Zhou Yu is taking care of the Red Cliff. There should be no major problem. The most important thing right now is to take Changsha." The two brothers were worthy of being Liu Bei's good friends. They immediately saw through Liu Bei's thoughts and joined in the uproar. Zhao Yun was the only one who remained silent. At this time, Zhuge Liang had only recently left the mountain and had yet to display much of his abilities in Liu Bei's faction. Naturally, he had not obtained the sincere support of Guan Yu and Zhang Fei. Therefore, they spoke without any scruples. Hearing this, Liu Bei pretended to be unhappy. With a sullen expression, he scolded, "Second brother, third brother, do not be rude. Hurry up and apologize to the military advisor." "Big brother." Zhang Fei was somewhat unhappy. "If you don't apologize, then don't recognize me as your big brother." Liu Bei used his usual method. As expected, Zhang Fei became anxious. Like a child abandoned by his father, he bowed to Zhuge Liang and stammered, "Ida was reckless. I hope that the military advisor can forgive him." Hearing this, Zhuge Liang laughed in an unconcerned manner and said, "Ida is honest and upright. What wrong did he do? Ha!" With that, the awkward atmosphere in the tent was somewhat dispelled. "Military advisor, can we be more careful with the withdrawal of the army? Should we wait a few more days? Once we occupy Changsha, we will immediately send out the army. What do you think?" After going around in circles, Liu Bei returned to his original argument. Among the three kingdoms, no one was more thick-skinned than Lu Xuanda. Seeing this, Zhuge Liang sighed in his heart. He knew that it would not be good to go against his lord's wishes. He said, "That is the only way. I will immediately arrange a meeting with Han Xian and strive to finalize this matter as soon as possible." "Good. Thank you for your trouble, military advisor." Liu Bei was overjoyed. Lord Chunxin had not said a word from beginning to end. Liu Bei wanted to drag things out. Naturally, he was more than happy to do so. He could also use this opportunity to teach Xiong Ba and Wolf Warrior a lesson. With that, the matter was settled. Outside Linyuan City, in Huang Gai's military camp, unlike Liu Bei's hesitation, when Huang Gai received the news, he did not hesitate and immediately ordered the withdrawal of the army. He was prepared to give up on Wuling County, which was at his fingertips. The Lord Player who reported the news advised, "General, our army has less than 30,000 men. If we rashly head to the Red Cliffs, it is very likely that we will encounter the enemy fleet on the way. When that time comes, I am afraid that we will not be able to provide reinforcements and will instead meet with misfortune. General, please reconsider." Hearing this, Huang Gai frowned. In the recently concluded Battle of Red Cliffs, Huang Gai was the main hero. The plan to feign surrender and attack with fire was exactly what Huang Gai had presented to Zhou Yu. As a veteran general, Huang Gai was also a meritorious elder of the River East group. Having served 3 generations of Sun Jian, Sun Su, and Sun Quan, he was indeed a man who grew stronger with age. As early as when Sun Jian, as a feudal lord, was crusading against Dong Zhuo, Huang Gai had been by his side. Therefore, Huang Gai's loyalty to the River East group was unquestionable. However, Huang Gai was not an impulsive person. Although he was worried about the Red Cliffs, he could still listen to other people's opinions. "What do you think we should do?" Huang Gai asked. "My opinion is to join forces with Liu Bei's army and rush to the Red Cliffs. This way, we won't have to worry about being defeated by the enemy one by one. We might even be able to cooperate with the Red Cliffs garrison and launch a pincer attack." The Lord suggested. Those who could participate in the battle were all outstanding figures among the lords of the China region. Naturally, none of them were incompetent. "You are right." Huang Gai nodded in agreement. "But will we make it in time?" Huang Gai was experienced. From the information revealed by the dissimulated lord, it was not difficult to infer that the enemy's fleet must be approaching the mouth of the Han River and not far from the Red Cliffs. On the contrary, they were still around Dongting Lake, further away than the enemy. As for Liu Bei's army, it was even further away. Taking into account the time spent on the road, The situation was not optimistic. The Lord was very confident. "General, don't worry. The dissimulated army stationed at the Red Cliffs is an elite navy from the main plain. They're prepared in advance. Therefore, I conclude that even if the enemy's fleet arrives at the Red Cliffs before us, they will not be able to take the Red Cliffs easily. Perhaps they will suffer a setback." It was no secret in Sun Lu's camp that Xiongba and Battlewolf were stationed at the Red Cliffs. Therefore, we must not rush this matter. We must make proper preparations and annihilate them with absolute military strength. The Lord concluded in a sonorous voice. The Lord's words finally convinced Huanggai. "All right, we will do as you say. I will send a letter to Liu Bei now." Huanggai was very straightforward. "Then I will take my leave first." With that, the dissimulated Lord tactfully walked out of the tent. "Big brother, this is the only thing I can do for you." Facing the sky, the Lord muttered to himself. There is a trace of melancholy and bitterness in his words, as if there was something difficult to say. If there were other people here, they would definitely recognize that this person was the Siege Lion. The discord between the dragon-seeking acupuncture point and Shanghai City had long been spread within the Shanghai Alliance. Without exception, everyone stood on the side of Shanghai City and expressed that they did not understand the dragon-seeking acupuncture point's unreasonable actions. After all, before Ouyang Shuo went out to sea, he had specially gathered them and made 3 rules. Moreover, he had said that when Ouyang Shuo was not in the territory, Shanghai City would not interfere with the internal affairs of the members. Therefore, Song Jia's refusal was nothing more than the implementation of Ouyang Shuo's decision before he left. Unexpectedly, the attitude of the members deepened the resentment in the dragon-seeking acupuncture point's heart. As a good friend of the dragon-seeking acupuncture point, the Siege Lion knew the cause and effect of this matter very clearly. Although he sympathized with the dragon-seeking acupuncture point's fiasco on Izhou Island, he did not blame Shanghai City. The dragon-seeking acupuncture point had complained to him and had even chosen Sun Lu's camp in a fit of pique. Helplessly, the Siege Lion could only choose Sun Lu's camp. Firstly, it was to take the opportunity to comfort the dragon-seeking acupuncture point and appease his emotions. Secondly, it was to prevent the dragon-seeking acupuncture point from doing anything irrational. He did not expect Sun Lu's camp to choose a branch. The two of them did not have a tacit understanding and did not expect to go together. According to the Siege Lion's understanding of the dragon-seeking acupuncture point, the dragon-seeking acupuncture point was a mission madman who liked to take unusual paths. Therefore, the dragon-seeking acupuncture point had the highest probability of choosing the most unpopular Huanggai branch. Unexpectedly, the Siege Lion did not see the dragon-seeking acupuncture point in Huanggai's army. Therefore, it further deepened his worry about the dragon-seeking acupuncture point. Dragon-seeking acupuncture point, you must not do anything stupid. Otherwise, you will really be consigned to eternal damnation. The Siege Lion sighed in his heart, feeling extremely conflicted. On one side was his extremely respected big brother. If it was not for Ouyang Shuo's support, the Black Lion City would not be where it was today. On the other side was his few good brothers in the game, a good confidant. As such, the Siege Lion was really in a dilemma. Chapter 700. The clear Han River surged into the murky Yangtze like a ferocious tiger. The water in the river was clear and turbid. The clear and turbid water flowed in the same river, but did not mix with each other, forming a very clear boundary. The victorious fleet sailed down the river and into the vast Yangtze. The torrential waters flowed endlessly. Ouyang Shuo stood at the bow and gazed at the vast Yangtze, recalling the ancient poem that had been sung for 1,000 years. The Yangtze surges east, washing away heroes. Success or failure, vanishing in the blink of an eye. The green mountains still stand. The setting sun glows several times. The white-haired fisherman and woodcutter are used to watching the autumn moon and the spring breeze. A jug of muddy wine is a joyous reunion. Many things from ancient to modern times have become jokes. He was filled with emotion. Ouyang Shua's state of mind was like the Yangtze before him, sometimes surging with passion, sometimes calm. The vast Yangtze had nurtured countless Chinese civilizations and tolerated all things. Only in this way could it last forever. Jiasu stood behind Ouyang Shu, his expression unreadable, his eyes reflecting his contemplation. The shock that the fleet had given Jiasu had slowly subsided with the passage of time. What Jiasu couldn't understand was Ouyang Shua's actions in the past few days. After capturing Lu Su, Lu Ming, Gan Ning, and Zhou Tai, Jiasu found it strange that Ouyang Shua hadn't even seen them. He'd only ordered the soldiers to take good care of them. Such behavior was too strange. Jiasu had long since noticed that Ouyang Shua was thirsty for talent. He clearly valued these generals. Otherwise, he wouldn't have ordered that no one be spared when he cleaned up the battlefield. If that was the case, why didn't he persuade them to surrender? Jiasu didn't understand. Ouyang Shua sensed Jiasu's confusion, but he wasn't going to explain. It was easy to capture generals on the battlefield, but difficult to subdue them. The hard part was gaining their loyalty. The curtains had just been drawn on the battle map. How could Ouyang Shua expect Lu Su and the others to surrender obediently? If that was the case, he wouldn't dare accept it. There had to be a trap. It was better to wait for the right time than to waste his breath. Ouyang Shua's focus was on how to take the Red Cliff. After defeating Lu Su's army, they didn't really kill all of them. They also took more than 2,000 captives. Intelligence officers had obtained some information from interrogating the captives. One of them was Lu Su has received an urgent order to return to the Red Cliff immediately. Ouyang Shua was unable to guess if Huang Gai and Liu Bei had received the same urgent order. But what was certain was that the Red Cliff was not peaceful at the moment. They must have made preparations. Especially after the annihilation of Lu Su's army, the enemy would definitely be alerted. As such, Ouyang Shua had to be even more cautious. When he just entered the Yangtze River, Ouyang Shua was still thinking whether he should first go upstream and annihilate Huang Gai's army along the way, so as to avoid any future troubles before dealing with the Red Cliff garrison. Jiasu did not approve of this. It's highly likely that Huang Gai's army has joined up with Liu Bei's army. If we attack rashly, I'm afraid that our enemy will fail and we'll be stuck in a quagmire. We won't be able to extricate ourselves, and this will affect our plan to capture the Red Cliffs. On the contrary, as long as they could capture the Red Cliff and cut off their communication with Chai Sang, Huang Gai's army would come uninvited. When that time comes, we only need to wait at the Scarlet Cliff. Why would we need to go on an expedition? Jiasu analyzed this way. When Ouyang Shua heard this, he couldn't help but sigh in admiration. On the 7th day of the battle, aboard Dragonhead, they were only 2 days away from the Red Cliff. Ouyang Shua ordered the fleet to slow down. At the same time, hundreds of Scarlet Horse boats separated from the fleet and brought hundreds of frogmen to the Red Cliff to investigate the enemy situation. The fleet advanced slowly while waiting for information from the front. On the evening of the 8th day, the first batch of frogmen brought the latest information. According to the frogmen, the enemy had built a large water stronghold at the Red Cliff and the Wuling Forest. There were no less than 100 warships in the water stronghold, and the security was tight. Outside the water stronghold, it was deliberately disguised, especially the water stronghold on the Wuling Forest. The water walls surrounding it were made of burnt wood. From outside the water stronghold, it was impossible to see the situation inside the water stronghold. Naturally, it was impossible to discover the ill-intentioned warships. Some of the taller warships were even deliberately disguised. If the army passed through the river between the water strongholds without any precautions, it would be hard to imagine that there would be a large number of naval troops lying in ambush on both sides. If they were even slightly careless, they could fall into an ambush. The enemy's objective was self-evident. In addition, the frogmen brought another important piece of information. According to the special frogmen who sneaked into the water stronghold and boarded the warships under the cover of night, the enemy's warships were mainly fortress ships and warships. What was more frightening was that the fortress ships and warships were all equipped with cannons. Preliminary estimates suggested that there were no less than 300 cannons. Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed when he heard this. Without a doubt, Xiongba and the others must have mastered the technology to manufacture cannons. Otherwise, it would be impossible to equip such a large number of cannons. Their secrecy is really well done. Ouyang Shua sighed. In the war room. Wenhe, do you have a good plan? Ouyang Shua asked Jia Su. Even Zheng, he turned his head and looked at Jia Su with anticipation in his eyes. After a few days of getting along, Zheng he admired Jia Su's intelligence very much. Jia Su did not decline modestly. Wasn't this the duty of a strategist? He pondered for a while and asked, Commander-in-Chief, if we attack by force, no matter what kind of ambush the enemy has, what are the chances of winning if we directly attack the enemy on both sides of the river? Hearing this, Zheng He's expression turned solemn. He got up and walked to the sand table in the center of the war room. On the sand table that was 5 meters long and 3 meters wide, according to the information obtained by the frogmen, the enemy's deployment during the Battle of Red Cliffs had been perfectly reconstructed on the sand table through countless warship models. Zheng, he placed the warship models that represented the ocean-going fleet on the river between the two water fortresses. As he placed them, he pondered. The warship models were placed very slowly. Obviously, Zheng he was simulating the battle scene in his mind to formulate the fleet's formation and firepower deployment. After a full half an hour, the models of the ocean-going fleet were finally placed. Hundreds of warships were placed on the narrow river, filling up the space. Even Ouyang Shua could not see through the mystery of this formation. After the placement, Zheng he did not stop. Instead, he began to adjust the warships and the water fortresses on both sides. One by one, Zheng he moved the warships out of the simulated water fortresses and began to attack the ocean-going fleet from both sides. Looking at Zheng He's stern expression, Ouyang Shua felt that the sand table was currently filled with the flames of war. The cannons were roaring in unison, and a tragic battle was unfolding. Ouyang Shua and Jia Su both held their breaths, not daring to disturb Zheng He at this moment. Following the simulation, one warship after another was sprinkled with fierce kerosene by Zheng He and ignited with candles, signifying the fall of the warships. The small flames contained an indescribable killing intent. The further they went, the more warships were on fire. At the same time, Zheng he was constantly adjusting the formation of both sides. Simulating both sides' battle tactics in one go was a huge test of his brain power and strategic command. Ouyang Shua could clearly see that Zheng He's forehead was already dripping with sweat. Zheng He himself did not seem to notice and was still simulating the battlefield. The further they went, the more warships were on fire. Even the ocean-going fleet was not spared. Warships after warships were set on fire. After a full hour and a half, the simulation of the entire battle was finally completed. The huge sand table suddenly became empty. The warship models that had been set on fire had long been burned to ashes. Only a few warships floated alone on the river. Some of them were still emitting black smoke. Ouyang Shua and Jia Su looked at each other with solemn expressions. The situation could not be more obvious. If they attacked, even if the ocean-going fleet could win, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Ouyang Shua could not bear such an outcome. The ocean-going fleet's goal was not only to defeat the Red Cliff garrison, but also to firmly occupy the strategic location of the Red Cliff. If it was a Pyrrhic victory, how could a crippled ocean-going fleet withstand the attack of Huanggai and Liu Bei's allied forces? In that case, it would undoubtedly be a failure. Therefore, the ocean-going fleet had to cleanly and beautifully eliminate the Red Cliff garrison. At this moment, Zheng he had already come to his senses. He bowed to Ouyang Shua and said, "My lord, Mr. As you can see, after the simulation, our army only has a 60% chance of winning. Even so, we have not taken into account the situation where Huanggai's and Liu Bei's armies arrive in time to reinforce the battlefield. In the midst of a fierce battle, the consequences would be unthinkable if an army were to arrive as reinforcements." Zheng He's expression was solemn. Ouyang Shua was speechless for a long time. The Red Cliff was originally a strategic location, but now it was in the enemy's hands. In a situation where the difference in military strength and equipment was not big, and they did not have the geographical advantage, it would be extremely difficult to cleanly eliminate the enemy. Right now, they could only come up with a strange plan. Ouyang Shuo raised his head and looked at Jia Su, his eyes filled with anticipation. Jia Su stared at the sand table, his brows tightly knitted. Clearly, he had not thought of a plan to defeat the enemy. "My lord, can we use the frogman tactic we used before?" Zheng, he interrupted. "You mean, arrange for the frogmen to sink the ships?" "That's right." Zheng, he nodded. "Quietly sink their warships. Let's see how they can still show off." The frogman tactic's first application had destroyed the Spanish invincible fleet and brought Ouyang Shuo a huge amount of wealth. The shocking scene at that time had a huge impact on Zheng He. It was still fresh in his memory. Ouyang Shuo thought for a moment, then shook his head and refused. "No, we are on the river, not in the sea. The river is narrow, so our fleet cannot reach the Red Cliff and wait for an opportunity to move. Moreover, their warships are currently docked in the water stronghold. Once the enemy's warships are penetrated, they can abandon their ships and directly go ashore. In this way, only their warships will be destroyed, but the enemy's army will remain unharmed. That way, even if we occupy the Red Cliff, we will still have to face the constant harassment of the enemy's army." Ouyang Shuo's analysis was very accurate. There was one more point that Ouyang Shuo did not mention. If he did not completely eliminate the Red Cliff garrison, it would be disadvantageous to his next plan. Therefore, this can only be used as a last resort. There is no other choice. Ouyang Shuo made the final decision. If possible, we still have to think of a more effective plan. Chapter 701. What about fire? How about fire? Zheng He continued to suggest. Zheng He had been thinking of a way to defeat the enemy when he was deducing the battle situation. Seeing that Jun Shang had rejected the frogman tactic, Zheng He was unwilling to give up and proposed another plan. "How do we attack with fire? Tell me the details." Ouyang Shuo didn't want to discourage Zheng He's enthusiasm. Perhaps their discussion could provide Jia Su with some ideas. Put fierce fire oil and straw on the Scarlet Horseboat. Arrange for the frogmen to pull the boat underwater, get close to the enemy warships, and then set the boat on fire. They won't be able to escape. Zheng He explained. Ouyang Shuo thought for a while and shook his head. "First, the enemy has cannons. The Scarlet Horseboat is such an obvious target. I'm afraid it will sink before it even gets close. Even the frogmen underwater won't be able to escape. Second, the river is narrow and the enemy is attacking from both sides. Even if the Scarlet Horseboat is lucky enough to reach the enemy warships and set them on fire, once the wind blows, the fire will spread. I'm afraid we will be burned. Then, what if we use the night to pour the fierce fire oil on the enemy warships?" Zheng He's imagination ran wild. The frogmen are powerful, but they aren't superhumans. How can they bring a large amount of fierce fire oil to the enemy warships without being detected? Ouyang Shuo smiled and shook his head. Zheng He was ashamed. "Jun Shang is very thoughtful. I admire you." Ouyang Shuo smiled and waved his hand. He looked at Jia Su again. Seeing that Jia Su had already shifted his gaze from the sand table, he smiled and asked, "Mister, have you thought of a way to defeat the enemy?" "I do have a plan. I hope Jun Shang can consider it." Jia Su smiled and nodded. "Mister, please speak." Ouyang Shuo was overjoyed. The two plans proposed by the commander-in-chief are good ideas, but they have certain limitations. Even so, they really gave me some inspiration. Frogmen were involved in both strategies, and the frogmen played a central role in both plans. During this time, I have learned a thing or two about special frogmen. At this point, Jia Su paused for a moment, then continued. "The frogmen in your army are very amazing. They come and go without a trace in the water, like a dragon crossing the river, only seeing its head and not seeing its tail. So, it is a waste to only arrange for the frogmen to perform auxiliary tasks such as scouting, digging, and towing boats." Overkill. Zheng He clearly disagreed. The naval battle in the Mediterranean Sea had already proven the value of the frogmen. Since I'm a dragon crossing the river, I can't be a snake. I have to show some of the abilities of a dragon. Dragons could hide in the dust, but they could also call the wind and summon the rain. If they wanted to end this battle cleanly, the best way was to execute a decapitation operation. Frogman is undoubtedly the best choice. Jiasu answered Zheng He's question. Operation Decapitation? Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed. In reality, the Frogman Brigade's duties were not only reconnaissance behind enemy lines, but also decapitation. The reason why Ouyang Shua hadn't thought of this was because in his senses, the Frogman team hadn't truly formed yet. Ouyang Shua didn't have much confidence in sending them on such a difficult mission. According to our intelligence, the enemy has a commander in Wulin and Chibi, and each of them has an iconic flagship. As long as the Frogmen sneak into the enemy's flagship at night and successfully decapitate it, even if only one of them succeeds, it will be of great help to our next military plan. Jia Su explained further. Sir, allow me to interrupt. Ouyang Shua pressed his hands down. The enemy's flagship is about the same size as our dragon head. There are no less than 1,000 or 2,000 soldiers on board, and even more sailors. It's very difficult to execute the decapitation. If we aren't careful and make too much noise, the entire water stronghold will explode. If we wait until then, I'm afraid we won't be able to decapitate them, but we'll alert the enemy instead. Ouyang Shua voiced out his concern. If he could really decapitate them, Ouyang Shua would definitely be willing. Jiasu probably didn't know about the settings of the Lord players in the battle map. Once Xiongba, or Wolf Warrior, was stabbed to death, their troops would disappear from the battle map. In that case, it could be said that it would be effortless to take down Chibi. The crux of the problem, now, was how to ensure the success of the decapitation. Based on Ouyang Shua's understanding of Xiongba, he wasn't just an ordinary cunning person. He was extremely shrewd, and his protection of the flagship had reached an extreme level. If the decapitation really failed and alerted the enemy, it would be very troublesome. Jiasu's expression was relaxed as he said with a smile, My lord's worries are correct. What I mean is, as long as the plan is well planned, the success rate should be above 70%. We could take the risk and give it a try. I'd like to hear the details. Ouyang Shua bowed. First, my lord said that the enemy's warships, especially the flagship, are the same as our warships. Therefore, we have an innate advantage. We can let the frogmen familiarize themselves with the overall layout and detailed structure of the enemy's warships. In addition, we can also plan a detailed route of action and contingency plans in advance. If the conditions are right, we can even practice. This can be done. Ouyang Shua nodded. Second, we can use fierce fire oil together. As far as I know, a small amount of fierce fire oil can be stored in sealed wooden barrels. After the frogmen board the ship, they can first place the fierce fire oil in key locations. When the time is right, they can immediately ignite the fierce fire oil. Once the fire is ignited, it can effectively block the soldiers on the flagship, and can also hinder the rescue of other warships. Jiasu continued. Ouyang Shua frowned when he heard this. If that's the case, won't the frogmen on the ship be in danger? For the success of the plan, some sacrifices are necessary. Jiasu said lightly. When Ouyang Shua heard this, he felt a chill in his heart. As expected of a poison warrior, if they really wanted to carry out the decapitation plan, they would need no less than 3,000 frogmen. In the end, only a few would be able to escape. On the side, Zheng, he also wanted to say something, but stopped. Sir is right. I agree with this plan. Ouyang Shua ignored Zheng He's expression and decisively said, At the same time, to ensure the success of the decapitation, I will arrange for 500 divine guards to cooperate with the frogmen. The task of the divine guards is to kill the enemy's commander. My lord is wise. Jiasu's eyes also flashed with a trace of light. Jiasu already knew what kind of existence the divine guards were. They were personal guards that were even stronger than the imperial guards. With the participation of the divine guards, the success rate of the entire plan would increase by at least 30%. 1/6 of the 3,000 divine guards would be sacrificed in one go. Jiasu had a new understanding of Ouyang Shua's ruthlessness. As a superior person, he should have a heart of stone and not be soft-hearted. On this point, whether it was his master Cao Cao or Liu Bei who had yet to rise up, they were actually the same people. Jiasu's impression of Ouyang Shua was getting better and better. Even the way he addressed Ouyang Shua had quietly changed to my lord, although such a form of address was only out of formality at the moment. In the long run, Jiasu was afraid that he would be completely subdued by this young man in front of him and willingly serve him. How extraordinary! Jiasu sighed in his heart. Among everyone present, only Zheng he had a somewhat dejected expression on his face. Even now, this scholarly general still hadn't completely adapted to this so-called decisiveness in killing. My lord, Zheng he wanted to say something, but stopped. What do you want to say? Say it. Ouyang Shua's expression was uncertain, and his tone was indifferent. If Zheng he still said something disheartening, like sacrificing too much, Ouyang Shua was afraid that he would have to reconsider whether Zheng he was truly qualified to be the commander-in-chief of the Nanyang Navy. With the establishment of the 5 major fleets, the commander-in-chief of the Nanyang Navy had a status even higher than that of Bai Qi and the other commanders of the armies. He commanded more than 500,000 troops. Needless to say, the existence of the Nanyang Navy was directly related to the territory's maritime hegemony. Therefore, the commander of such a valiant navy couldn't have the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. During the voyage, Ouyang Shua had already consciously changed Zheng He's inherent concept, making him accept the cruelty and ruthlessness of war and abandon the halo of a messenger of peace in history. Now, it was time to test the results. It couldn't be denied that Zheng He's tactical attainments were excellent, and his experience at sea was also unparalleled. However, if Zheng He didn't have the heart to kill as a general, then he would be thoroughly unqualified. In his heart, Ouyang Shua secretly decided the fate of Zheng He and the fleet. The matter was monstrous. However, on the surface, no one could see the strangeness in Ouyang Shua's heart. The expression on Zheng He's face was also changing and uncertain. From Zheng He's expression, it wasn't difficult to guess that an intense battle was going on in the heart of this commander-in-chief of the Navy. The old and new ideas were violently colliding in Zheng He's mind. Scenes from his previous life and scenes from the voyage alternated and changed. Zheng he was like 2 completely opposite spaces in the depths, his whole person completely torn in half, secretly enduring the heart-wrenching pain. On one side was mercy, and on the other side was killing. Before this, Zheng he had been swaying left and right on both sides. To be honest, he was suffering great pain. Ouyang Shua's words had undoubtedly forced Zheng he to the edge of the cliff. Zheng he wasn't a fool. He acutely felt that today's conversation, although sudden, was something that would happen sooner or later. The ruler's patience was limited. Zheng he had to make a choice. The atmosphere in the war room suddenly became heavy, making it hard for people to breathe. An uneasy aura floated in the air. There wasn't a trace of wind in the war room, as if the entire space had been frozen. Even Jia Su's smile disappeared from his face as he silently watched the ruler and minister. After a long time, Zheng he finally raised his head. His voice was hoarse, and his whole body was drenched, as if he had just walked out of a steamer. He said with difficulty, "Ruler, this general means that underwater breathing apparatus is very rare. If we can't retrieve the breathing apparatus after sending 3,000 frogmen, the loss will be too great. Should we consider arranging for people to collect the underwater breathing apparatus after boarding the ship and send it back to the fleet first?" Yes. Ouyang Shua looked at Zheng he seriously, a trace of admiration flashing in his eyes. The air in the war room flowed again. Phew! Someone secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 702. Ouyang Shua left Jia Su and Zheng he to draw up a detailed battle plan. He then left the room and went to the top deck of the Dragonhead. The soldiers of the Divine Martial Guard were training on the deck regardless of the weather. The slightly wobbling deck was like flat ground in front of the Divine Martial Guard's powerful martial power. Because the dragon head could only carry a limited number of people, only 1,000 of the 3,000 were actually stationed on the ship. The remaining 2,000 Divine Martial Guards were assigned to the 4 frigates surrounding the dragon head. Ruler, seeing Ouyang Shaw, the commander of the Divine Martial Guard, Wang Feng, quickly walked over. Ouyang Shaw nodded and went straight to the point. There is a secret mission that requires the Divine Martial Guard. Take 500 capable men to participate in this mission. Don't worry, Ruler. I will make a list in a bit. Wang Feng didn't hesitate. The Divine Martial Guard was born to kill enemies. None of them were cowards. If this opportunity was given to other troops, they would refuse it. But for the Divine Martial Guard, they would definitely fight for it. This mission is extremely dangerous and has a slim chance of survival. You have to make it clear to the men that the only son in the family or those with a wife and children cannot participate, Ouyang Shaw instructed. Although Ouyang Shaw was cold, it was because he had no choice. He wasn't truly cold-blooded. The 3,000 Divine Martial Guards were like his children. He wouldn't sacrifice them unless he had no other choice. Is that so? I understand. Wang Feng's face turned solemn. The sharp Wang Feng immediately sensed that this mission wasn't normal. In the past, Ruler wouldn't be so hesitant. Most of the time, Ruler would just arrange for his personal guards to pass on a verbal order. This time, Ruler not only came personally, but also gave detailed instructions. This was truly rare. Ouyang Shaw sighed and continued, "One more thing, the targets are all skilled in martial arts. Pick 2 more strong men to lead the team. We can't let down the prestige of the Divine Martial Guard." Zhang Lang and Xiong Ba's secondary professions were generals with extraordinary combat power. Other than the threat they posed, they would also have personal guard around them. Both of them were overlords of their own regions and occupied a province. Even if their personal guards couldn't compare to the Divine Martial Guards, they were comparable to the Imperial Guards. Thus, in order to kill the 2 of them, they needed a valiant general to lead the team. It was a good thing that every member of the Divine Martial Guard was the cream of the crop. Each of them had their own unique skills. There were godly archers, spear kings, and even heroes. Warriors with outstanding martial arts were not rare in the Divine Martial Guards. How strong? Wang Feng couldn't tell. There was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. Jun Shang only said to be strong, but in the Divine Martial Guards where the strong gathered, it was really hard to judge. The strongest. When Wang Feng heard this, his eyes flashed, and he suddenly knelt on one knee. "My lord, this general requests to fight." "No." Ouyang Shaw refused without hesitation. "You are the commander of the Divine Martial Guard. How can you take the risk?" Wang Feng, on the other hand, was stubborn. He sternly said, "My lord, it's because I'm the commander of the Divine Martial Guard that I have to do this. I really don't feel at ease arranging for someone else. You better think it through. Even someone as powerful as you might die in this operation." Ouyang Shaw's expression was solemn. He couldn't refuse Wang Feng's request to fight again and again. Otherwise, it would be a blow to Wang Feng's prestige in the army. This general has thought it through very clearly. Wang Feng's eyes flashed with determination. Ouyang Shaw looked at Wang Feng with a complicated expression. "Since that's the case, then go." Ouyang Shaw's vast eyes contained another meaning that only Wang Feng could understand. In truth, when Ouyang Shaw returned from his voyage, his wife, Song Jia, had told him that Qing might have taken a liking to Wang Feng and that there was some interest between the 2. One was the commander of the Divine Martial Guard while the other was a princess. They were a good match. Thus, Ouyang Shaw didn't object. He even had Song Jia tell Qing that if she really liked Wang Feng, he could have Song Jia act as a bridge to make this matter happen. Qing was lonely, so finding a husband like Wang Feng was a good choice. Of course, Ouyang Shaw also had some thoughts in this. If Wang Feng married Qing, then Wang Feng's relationship with the Southern Border Protectorate would naturally improve. With this relationship, Wang Feng's loyalty would be even more trustworthy. It wasn't that Ouyang Shuo was snobbish and wanted to use his sworn sister to win over a general by his side. Ouyang Shuo was just going with the flow. If Qing Yu didn't have such an interest, he wouldn't have forced her. Yingyu, for example, had countless pursuers. There were even people who directly asked Ouyang Shuo or Song Jia, but all of them were rejected. Ouyang Shuo's meaning was very clear. He wouldn't arrange the marriage of his two sworn sisters. Whoever they married was completely up to them. Yingyu is currently wholeheartedly focused on official duties. Ouyang Shuo had once talked to his sister and found that she had no intention of marrying. After all, in an environment of ancient times, once Yingyu married, it would be very difficult for her to continue working in the Southern Border Protectorate. Even if Ouyang Shuo was willing, there would be many people who opposed it. Moreover, the Chui clan probably wouldn't be willing either. Ouyang Shuo had long seen that this sworn sister of his was a strong-willed person. In the real world, she would be a typical strong woman who wasn't willing to be tied down by marriage. Since Yingyu had clearly stated her intentions, Ouyang Shuo naturally wouldn't force her. After all, a game was just a game. Even if Yingyu didn't marry, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't be too late to discuss personal matters when they reached Hope Planet and Yingyu materialized in reality. Yingyu was both surprised and happy at Ouyang Shuo's support. Song Jia was a little jealous at how much Ouyang Shuo doted on his two sworn sisters. Now that Wang Feng had volunteered to carry out such a dangerous mission, Ouyang Shuo's conflicted feelings could be understood. If something really happened to Wang Feng, Ouyang Shuo really wouldn't know how to explain it to Qing. "Thank you, Lord." Wang Feng met Jun Shang's gaze and solemnly nodded, thanking him once more. With such a loyal general, what else could Ouyang Shuo say? Just as Ouyang Shuo was sighing with emotion, another shout came, "Lord, this general also requests to go to battle." He turned his head and saw that it was Chun Damong, the personal guard captain behind Ouyang Shuo. When Ouyang Shuo saw this, his head swelled, and he couldn't help but reprimand. "Why are you causing trouble?" No matter how he looked at it, there were always troublesome people around him. "Lord, this general is also a member of the Divine Martial Guard." Chen Damong had a good reason. At this time, even Commander Wang has stood out. This general can't be left behind. Nonsense. Ouyang Shuo nearly blew his beard and glared at him. Chun Damong, on the other hand, was smiling mischievously. "Lord, in terms of martial strength, if this general claims to be second in the Divine Martial Guard, then no one would dare to claim to be first. Picking two strong people to lead the team at once, I can't be absent." He really wasn't modest at all. "Are you serious?" Ouyang Shuo frowned. He also knew that this personal guard captain might look mischievous, but he was a person who paid attention. "Of course this general is serious." Chen Damong nearly patted his chest. Ouyang Shuo gave up and threw caution to the wind. Go, all of you go. You'll regret it." "Thank you, Lord." Chen Damong was overjoyed and thanked him. He looked at Wang Feng on his left and smiled. Heroes cherished heroes. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. He didn't have any more thoughts. Finally, he ordered, after selecting the members, report to Governor Zhang. "Remember, bring the divine armed crossbow and come back alive." "Yes, Lord." Wang Feng and Chen Damong bowed in unison. As soon as Ouyang Shuo left, the deck immediately became lively. Ouyang Shuo and Wang Feng didn't deliberately avoid the Divine Martial Guard members when they talked, so they heard everything clearly. "Boss, I'll sign up." "Me too. Count me in." Hearing the excitement behind him, Ouyang Shuo sighed in his heart. What a group of fearless people. For the next day, the entire fleet revolved around the assassination plan. Selecting members, equipping equipment, preparing supplies, familiarizing themselves with the structure of the warship, familiarizing themselves with the intelligence of the water bandits, conducting mock drills, and so on. With the cooperation of Zheng, He, and Jia Su, the progress was lightning fast. The entire fleet completely stopped. Morning of the 10th day of the battle. All the preparations for the decapitation operation had been completed. The carefully selected 2,000 frogmen team, along with the 500 most elite divine martial guards, were ready to go. The surface of the river was foggy and cold. In the fog, more than 200 scarlet horseboats carried the soldiers and war supplies, neatly lined up on the surface of the river, waiting for the emperor's inspection. The cold wind was biting cold, as if it was being cut by a knife. Every soldier stood ramrod straight. Their tall and straight bodies swayed rhythmically along with the scarlet horseboats. Ouyang Shuo boarded a scarlet horseboat to send off the soldiers. Ouyang Shuo didn't know how to say emotional words. He raised the big bowl in his hand, filled it with wine, and raised it high. "My sons, a bowl of wine is to send you off. When you return victorious, there will be delicious food and wine. Cheers!" Ouyang Shuo drank the wine in his bowl in one gulp. A spicy feeling went from his throat to his lungs, sweeping away the coldness of the morning. His body instantly felt warm. "Cheers!" The soldiers raised their bowls and drank it in one gulp. Splash! Bowls after bowls were thrown into the river to show their determination. After a brief farewell, the expedition frogman team immediately set off, disappearing into the vast fog. Ouyang Shuo stood there for a long time, silently gazing into the distance, his eyes deep in thought. Although Zheng He and Jia Su had formulated a meticulous plan and had considered every possible situation, Ouyang Shuo's heart was really uneasy. This plan was too risky, and the opponents were Xiong Ba and Zhang Lang, neither of whom were easy to deal with. One mistake, and the whole army would be wiped out. This was the battle that Ouyang Shuo had the least confidence in. "Emperor," Zheng He reminded him that it was time to go back. "Let's go back." Ouyang Shuo collected his emotions and prepared to return to Dragon Head. The entire process was seen by Jia Su, and he had a new understanding of this young king. Chapter 703. The night was as dark as ink, with dark clouds hanging overhead. In the ink-black night sky, not a single star could be seen. Even half of the crescent moon had quietly disappeared into the clouds. The entire night sky was like an endless black canvas, stifling and suffocating. A cold wind blew past, stirring up waves of dark clouds that rolled up and down, forming an unusual picture. The red cliff quietly crept in the night, like an evil beast withdrawing its fangs, slowly accumulating energy, waiting for dawn to tear all enemies into pieces. In the Wuling water stockade on the west bank of the red cliff, nearly 100 warships of various sizes were faintly discernible in the night, like a group of ghosts, quietly lurking in their lair. On the edge of the warship deck, there were lit torches, the flames flickering. Under the light of the torches, the water of the stockade was sparkling. On the deck of the warship, there were occasional sounds of patrolling guards walking back and forth. Faint shouts could be heard coming from the inconspicuous cabin. It seemed like some soldiers were gambling and using this as a pretext to pass the boring night. Even the soldiers on night patrol were quietly chatting. "This damn weather, it's so cold, it's so stifling. Yeah, we've been staying in this damn place for so long, and we haven't even seen a ghost. Why do you think we're hiding here? That's for his lordship to think about. Why are you guessing blindly? That's right, what's the point of talking about these useless things? Hurry up and get through this shift, then go back to bed. That's what I call comfortable. Be quiet and be alert." The captain in front finally could not stand it anymore and shouted. The night returned to silence, and one or two whispers of complaint could occasionally be heard in the cold wind. In the center of the water stockade, a giant 5-story ship stood out like a crane among chickens, surrounded by the other warships, like a king commanding the other warships, high above. That ship was Xiong Ba's flagship, the Overlord. In this battle, Xiong Ba was responsible for guarding the Wuling, while the opposite Red Cliff was guarded by Warwolf. On the top floor of the Overlord, in a luxuriously decorated study, Xiong Ba, dressed in military uniform, sat in front of a desk. An exquisite oil lamp was lit in front of the desk. The night wind blew, and the flames swayed left and right, about to be extinguished. The flickering lights made Xiong Ba's face look somewhat ferocious. The window of the study squeaked in the cold wind, which was unusually ear-piercing. Is it windy? Xiongba stood up and walked to the window, preparing to close it. He raised his head to look at the pitch-black night sky outside the window and frowned. The moon is dim and the stars are hidden. This kind of weather is abnormal. As the saying goes, the abnormality is the devil. For some reason, Xiongba had been feeling uneasy since daytime. He had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. The ink-like dark night made Xiongba feel stifled and suffocated. But there's no reason. Xiongba shook his head and tried to shake off the messy thoughts in his mind. Slightly suppressing the emotions in his heart, Xiongba simply closed the window, not wanting to take another look at that strange night. Half a month before the battle began, the Yin-Huang alliance had already been preparing for this battle. In Di Qin's words, no matter what, the Yin-Huang alliance had to take this opportunity to suppress the Mountain and Sea alliance and take back their authority in the China region. The explosion in the first half of the year was a way for the Yin-Huang alliance to accumulate energy. Shanghai City's promotion to a grade 3 county city had slightly suppressed their fighting spirit. However, it did not affect the overall situation. The real battle was still in the battle map. After obtaining the cannon manufacturing technology, Xiongba was even more confident. How can you say that you have no clothes? It's time for you to take a big tumble. Although Xiongba admired He Yu Wui's achievements, it did not mean that Xiongba did not want to defeat He Yu Wui. On the contrary, Xiongba's thirst for victory was more intense than anyone else. The battle on Izhou Island was generally regarded by the outside world as a game between the Yin-Huang alliance and the Shanghai alliance. In the end, the Yin-Huang alliance won and became a good footnote to the rise of the Yin-Huang alliance in the first half of the year. It became a symbol of the rise and fall of the two giants. Xiongba, one of the parties involved, naturally wouldn't think so superficially. Although taking down Izhou Island was Xiongba's proud work, he had also publicized the fruitful results of this war on different occasions, whether openly or secretly, to enhance the prestige of Overlord City. However, to say that this was a game between the two alliances was a bit of an exaggeration. Xiongba knew that from the beginning to the end, Shanghai City had not been involved in this war. Otherwise, if Shanghai City's Jiaozhou fleet had intervened in the war, it would have been enough to make Overlord City suffer. After defeating Dragon-Seeking City, Xiongba had borrowed a lot from the successful model of Jingzhou Island for the operation of Izhou Island, such as introducing shipbuilding, salt industry, and adventurer players to jointly develop marine resources. Xiongba had poured too much effort into Izhou Island. Xiongba's ambition was to equally divide the sea area of China with Shanghai City, one in the north and the other in the south. Izhou Island was a dividing line between the two sides. To realize this ambition, the Battle of Red Cliffs was a keynote. Xiongba had to prove on the battlefield that even in a naval battle, the hegemon city's navy could defeat the Shanghai City Navy that was already rumored to be godly. It was not difficult to understand why Xiongba attached so much importance to this war. It could even be said that in order to defeat Shanghai City's fleet, Xiongba had given up subduing the historical generals on the battle map, allowing Di Qin, Lord Chunxin, and others to beat him to it. Outside the battlefield, Xiongba had also done a lot of work. For example, the third-party force in secret contact with Dragon-Seeking City was actually a hidden force secretly cultivated by Xiongba's family. Its purpose was to provoke internal strife in the Shanghai alliance. Dragon-Seeking City and Siege Lion chose Sun Lu's camp, which undoubtedly proved the success of Xiongba's plan. To tell the truth, Xiongba was somewhat disdainful of Dragon-Seeking City. In Xiongba's eyes, Dragon-Seeking City was just a lucky dog. It had a relationship with Shanghai City, so it could go all the way to where it was now. How could a real civilian lord fight against the aristocratic families? The only exception was He Yu Wui. Therefore, the determination of the aristocratic families to eliminate this exception had never been shaken. It's just difficult. At the thought of the achievements of Shanghai City in this ocean voyage, Xiongba was somewhat frustrated. Even on the battle map, their progress was not smooth. The annihilation of Lu Su's army was undoubtedly a blow to Xiongba and Warwolf. The first part of the plan was completely declared a failure. According to the time calculation, the fleet of Shanghai City should have arrived at the Red Cliff as early as 2 days ago. But what was the result? They were ready for battle, and their nerves were taut. They were both nervous and excited, but they pounced on empty air. The fleet of Shanghai City seemed to have disappeared. Xiongba had also speculated whether the fleet of Shanghai City had given up the Red Cliff and turned to attack Liu Bei. After all, Liu Bei had Zhao Yun and Zhuge Liang as bait, so Shanghai City had every reason to go there. However, the information received in the evening denied this speculation. In order to achieve long-distance communication on the battle map, the Yanhuang Alliance also racked their brains. They spent a lot of money to buy 4 Golden Eagle Spirit Beasts from an adventurer team. These Spirit Beasts were extraordinary. They could really travel thousands of miles in a day and deliver information back and forth. In this way, the 3 teams of the Yanhuang Alliance, which were distributed in the Red Cliff, Dongting Lake, and Dreamy Cloud Swamp, could maintain smooth communication and exchange information with each other. The information in the evening was sent by Lord Chanshin. Although the two had a grudge against each other, they were both extremely rational people. They could still cooperate on the battle map. According to Lord Chanshin's report, the situation on their side was also somewhat bad. As early as when Lu Su's army was destroyed, Huang Gai had written to Liu Bei, requesting to join forces and rush to the Red Cliff together. The problem was at that time, Liu Bei was busy taking over Changsha Commandery. How could he set off immediately? Liu Bei's refusal undoubtedly angered Huang Gai. In the letter, Huang Gai directly reprimanded Liu Bei for his treachery. He said that Liu Bei was chased by Cao Cao like a stray dog. It was the people of Jiangdong who kindly took him in and gave him a place to settle down. Moreover, the army of Jiangdong defeated Cao Cao's menacing army in one fell swoop, shattering the legend of Cao Cao's invincible army. In this way, Liu Bei could linger on at death's door and live in peace. Now that the Red Cliff was in trouble, Liu Bei only wanted to occupy territory instead of sending reinforcements. It was extremely shameless. Such a letter humiliated Liu Bei so much that he could not show his face. Guan Yu and Zhang Fei even exploded on the spot, muttering that they would lead their troops to fight Huang Gai. Fortunately, Liu Bei knew that he was in the wrong. In the end, he stopped the two of them and avoided a civil war. Even so, a rift had already formed between the two sides, and they could no longer cooperate. In a fit of anger, Huang Gai personally led the army toward the Red Cliff. According to his calculations, it would take them 3 days to reach the Red Cliff. As for Liu Bei, he was not completely indifferent. While Liu Bei was busy pacifying the people of Changsha and stabilizing his rule, he was also preparing for the expedition. At the same time, in order to pacify the River East group, Liu Bei had Guan Yu lead the vanguard of the navy and set off for the expedition ahead of time. In other words, the fleet of Shanghai City was not attacking Liu Bei at all. Xiongba and Zhanlang were puzzled by this. Logically speaking, if they really wanted to attack the Red Cliff, shouldn't it be better to do it as soon as possible? If they delayed it for too long, what should they do when the armies from all sides gather at the Red Cliff? Should they wipe them out all at once? Xiongba did not believe that Wu Yi would be so arrogant. There must be something fishy going on here, Xiongba thought. But where exactly is the problem? Xiongba had never been able to figure this out. Could it be that there's a traitor among us? Has Ouyang Shua already found out about the arrangements at the Red Cliff? Is that why the fleet of Shanghai City doesn't dare to come? Xiongba cannot be blamed for being paranoid. They simply could not afford to lose this battle. Xiongba focused his suspicions on the other lords. For a moment, the Red Cliff was in a state of panic. The tense atmosphere had yet to dissipate. But no matter how much he investigated, he could not find a single suspicious person. Because of this, Xiongba locked himself in his study and pondered hard. Now, it seemed that this had no effect. Forget it, I'll go to sleep. Xiongba finally let out a long sigh and left the study. The oil lamp in the study gradually extinguished, and the room became pitch black again. The night was getting darker and darker. Late at night, even the soldiers who had gathered to gamble had dispersed and gone to rest. The water stockade became increasingly quiet. Only the howling of the cold wind could be heard in the air. At this moment, a group of ghosts sneaked in from the bottom of the water stockade and headed straight for the Overlord. An unexpected battle was about to take place in the pitch-black night. This night was destined to not be peaceful. P.S. Sheng Xiao's official WeChat account has been opened. Search for Swordsman Sheng Xiao on the account to add him. There will be constant updates of various settings, gossip, news, and so on. Seeking attention, seeking fans. Chapter 704. In the dark of the night, Wang Feng led 250 divine guards and 1,000 frogman soldiers into the Wulin water stockade silently. As soon as they entered, they headed straight for the Overlord. The layout of the water stockade had already been thoroughly investigated by the frogmen. The entire army of assassins was like a school of fish slipping through the water without anyone noticing. As soon as the frogmen got close to the Overlord, they spread out according to the drill and surrounded the Overlord. 100 frogmen retrieved their underwater breathing apparatus along the way and prepared to retreat. Go! Wang Feng made an attack gesture in the dark of the night. Like a chain, it was transmitted to the entire army. This gesture was taught in the Special Operations Base and was the standard gesture of the Special Forces in reality. All the soldiers of the Divine Guards and the Imperial Guards could understand it. The frogmen who participated in this operation also urgently received hand signal training. The night was dark and windy. It was best not to make a sound if they could. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The Divine Guards were the first to act. They threw out their claws and firmly grabbed onto the edge of the deck. The Divine Guards were like monkeys, nimbly pulling on the ropes and quickly boarding the warship. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water. After boarding, the Divine Guards lowered a rope ladder for the frogmen to climb up. Move! Wang Feng made another gesture. The Divine Martial Guards took down the Divine armed crossbows on their backs in unison, loaded the arrows, and disappeared from the deck in battle formation. The whole process was silent, like a civet in the dark night. After a while, the patrol on the deck appeared in the Divine Guard's vision. Attack! Pooh! 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 The crossbows were fired, and the arrows pierced through the air. Every Divine Guard was a master archer. Their control of the Divine armed crossbows had already reached the realm of never missing an arrow. Even in the dark of the night, with the light of the torch, they were still accurate. In less than 2 minutes, the patrol on the first deck was completely annihilated without any resistance. They didn't even have the chance to scream. Just like that, the Divine Guards were like a group of ghosts, advancing along the deck layer by layer, harvesting the lives of their enemies like the Grim Reaper in the night. The combat style of the Divine Guard was practically a replica of the Special Forces in real life. The first phase of their mission was to get rid of the patrol team's spies. On the other side, except for the 50 people who were responsible for sinking the ship, the rest of the Frogman team had all boarded the ship. There were also hundreds of barrels of fierce kerosene. Quick, hurry up! The commanding officer deliberately lowered his voice and commanded everyone to take action. The Frogman team immediately transformed into an army of ants, transporting barrels of fierce fire oil to every corner of the battleship and pouring them out. The dark, fierce fire oil flowed on the deck, and people would slip if they stepped on it. The location of the ferocious kerosene was precisely calculated. Once it was ignited, the entire warship would turn into a sea of fire. By that time, even the frogmen would not be able to escape. Therefore, this was the last resort. It could be considered a form of insurance. After arranging the fierce kerosene, the Frogman team didn't stop for a moment and immediately dispersed. According to the tasks assigned to them before they set off, some led teams into the cabins and were responsible for killing the crew members. A large number of sleeping sailors were killed in their sleep. The scene was extremely tragic. Occasionally, those who woke up were quickly killed, letting out 1 or 2 suppressed screams across the silent night sky. Blood began to corrode the dark night. Some frogmen lined up and went to support the Divine Guards. After all, the number of divine guards was limited. It wasn't easy to take down the top deck, and they needed firepower support. Some hid in the dark corners, ready to ignite the fierce kerosene at any time. These people responsible for igniting the fire were basically equivalent to members of the suicide squad. The last part was responsible for guarding the periphery and guarding against enemy reinforcements. The night was getting darker and darker. The dark night was oppressive and filled with an invisible smoke that was suffocating. Even a night wind had stopped, and the surroundings were silent. On the top deck of the Overlord, the Divine Guards had assembled. At this moment, the moon hidden in the clouds suddenly revealed itself. The soft moonlight shone down, illuminating the figures of the Divine Guards. Their armors were already stained with blood. Not every killing operation would be smooth sailing. If the location of the ambush was wrong, or if someone was lucky enough to escape the first round of attacks, then the Divine Guards would have to fight with their lives on the line. They had to ensure that they could quickly finish off the enemy without making a huge noise. The best way was naturally to engage in close combat. This way, it was unavoidable that they would be covered in blood, and some even died. The murderous aura of the Divine Guards had already taken form, making people fearful. Up until now, everything had gone smoothly, and there were no major accidents. Wang Feng, who was leading the team, didn't have a trace of joy on his face. Wang Feng knew that the next operation would be the biggest test for them. Everything that had happened before was just an appetizer. Intelligence showed that Xiong Ba's study and bedroom were both on the top floor, so the defense here was the tightest. There were 3 layers of defense inside and outside. The outermost layer was still the Navy patrols, numbering over 100 people. The middle layer was Xiong Ba's Imperial Guards, numbering around 200 people, all well-equipped and brave. As for the innermost layer, it was naturally Xiong Ba's personal guards, also numbering 100 people. It would be extremely difficult for the Divine Guards to break through these 3 layers of defense. Luckily, the Divine Guards weren't fighting alone. 10 minutes later, 300 of the most elite frogmen arrived. "General," the frogmen's commanding officer reported. "Move out." Wang Feng was as decisive as ever. Once everyone arrived, the battle began. 500 people quietly surrounded the patrols under the moonlight, and the divine armed crossbows fired again. Pooh! 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 The outermost patrols didn't resist at all, and were instantly turned into porcupines. Seeing this, Wang Feng secretly let out a sigh of relief. One had to know that the patrols were less than 100 meters away from the Imperial Guards. If they made any loud noises, the Imperial Guards would hear them. When that happened, the situation wouldn't be good. At this moment, an accident happened. At the back of the cabin, a member of the patrol team walked out unsteadily. From the looks of it, this person had temporarily left the team and ran to the side to relieve himself. "I'm back." As soon as the person came out of the cabin, he saw his brothers lying in a pool of blood. "Murder! Ugh!" As soon as he shouted, an arrow pierced his throat, and he fell to the ground dead. When this person first appeared, the Divine Guards thought the battle was over, and it was the time to relax. They didn't expect that such an oversight would allow a fish to escape the net. The scream of fear was extremely ear-piercing in the silent night. Wang Feng's expression instantly turned ugly. Such a loud scream immediately alerted the Imperial Guards in the middle. "Who is it? Quick, go and see what's going on. Stay alert. Prepare for battle." The Imperial Guards in charge of guarding were indeed elites. They panicked but didn't panic. They arranged for people to come and check, and they formed a battle formation while reporting the situation to their superiors. This way, the Divine Guards didn't have any chance. On the deck, corpses lay in pools of blood, looking very pale under the moonlight. At the same time, the Divine Martial Guard soldiers appeared in the Forbidden Army's field of vision. "Who are you?" The Imperial Guards had already quietly held their weapons in their hands. "Go!" Seeing this, Wang Feng knew that they could only attack by force. Wang Feng could tell at a glance that the enemy didn't want to get an answer at all. They were just trying to stall for time. How could Wang Feng fall for it? Kill! An assassination attempt had suddenly turned into an open murder. "There's an assassin." The Imperial Guard had already received the news, and the entire top deck woke up. What's going on? Xiongba walked out of his room. Like Ouyang Shaw, he remained vigilant even in his sleep. The commotion outside immediately woke Xiongba up from his sleep. The worry he had before sleeping had just turned into a nightmare. In his dream, Xiongba saw the entire water stronghold in a sea of fire. "Sir, there's an assassin outside." The Imperial Guard captain hurried over to report. "Assassin? What assassin?" Xiongba didn't react for a moment. Was it sent by the other lords? Xiongba was puzzled. This water stronghold was like a military camp. How could there be assassins? Could it be that there was a spy hidden among them, and they wanted to take advantage of the chaos to cause trouble? Xiongba wasn't very panicked at this moment. If it really was a spy that jumped out, Xiongba would be happy instead. It would save him the trouble of blindly thinking about it. Xiongba didn't believe that anyone could assassinate him in the water stronghold. "Sir, the other party is a legitimate army." The Imperial Guard captain's expression was somewhat solemn. "I just received news that the entire flagship has fallen. The Imperial Guards are holding them back." "What? The situation has already reached this point." Xiongba was shocked. "Sir, quickly retreat." The Imperial Guard captain's expression was somewhat anxious. "Retreat? No, let me think." Xiongba was Xiongba after all. He wasn't a coward. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. Damn it, they couldn't have been sent by Wu Yi, right? How did they sneak into the water stronghold? The domestic players didn't know about the underwater breathing apparatus. Immediately, sound the alarm. They must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall to dare to mess with the king of hell. Xiongba wasn't a good person. The other party dared to behave atrociously in his territory. He wanted these people to not return. "Wu Yi, I didn't think you would use such a lowly method." Xiongba calmed down. It was as if he had won a battle, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. As expected of an ambitious and ruthless person, his way of thinking was different from others. The rumbling sound of war drums suddenly exploded in the water stronghold, completely breaking the silence of the night. Like a frying pan, the sleeping water stockade immediately woke up. The sleeping beasts opened their eyes and revealed their mouths full of fangs, as if they were about to devour someone. Chapter 705. The alarm sounded and hundreds and thousands of torches were lit one by one. They were like stars in the night sky, illuminating the water stockade as if it was daytime and completely dispelling the darkness of the night. What happened? Awakened by the ear-piercing alarm, the soldiers who had just crawled out of their warm blankets asked each other what was going on in a daze. "I don't know. It's the flagship. I heard there are assassins." "Assassin? Who's so audacious? Does he not want to live anymore? Damn it. How dare they disturb my sweet dreams? I will definitely teach them a lesson." "That's right. You're making a ruckus in the middle of the night. You're not even letting us rest properly." The soldiers who had been woken up were filled with resentment. "Stop quarreling and gather on the deck." The leading officer began to gather the troops. The warships around the Overlord were already closing in on the Overlord, preparing to set up a springboard to provide support. To the Navy of Overlord City, being provoked in their territory was something that could not be tolerated. After being stifled for so many days, the soldiers had long wanted to stretch their muscles and bones. "Perfect. Let's start with these goddamn assassins." The soldiers were filled with killing intent. A murderous aura gathered above the water stockade. At the same time, in an inconspicuous corner of the water stockade, an ambiguous gaze was cast over. Overlord City's navy was not the only one stationed in the Wuling water stockade. There were also two other feudal lords. Interesting. A suzerain side. Naturally, they wouldn't join the fun and would just watch the show quietly from the sidelines. Up until now, no one believed that the enemy's assassination would succeed. That was simply wishful thinking. On the top deck of the Overlord, the atmosphere was tense to the extreme. "General, the enemy's water camp has been alerted. What should we do now?" The soldier asked Wang Feng. Wang Feng didn't panic, and a look of determination flashed across his face. "Gather all the frogmen to the top deck and ignore everything else. Once the team has assembled, immediately set the fire. Understood. A trace of determination flashed across the soldier's face. Before they set off, they had already thought about the consequences of setting a fire. They were unafraid of death. Tell the frogmen to start working immediately. Don't let the target escape. Wang Feng added. Don't worry, General. I've already given the order. Then let's fight. Wang Feng threw away the god's crossbow and took out his spear. Kill. Immediately, the divine martial guards and the forbidden army clashed. The two most elite troops were like a needle against an awn, competing with each other. In comparison, the 300 frogmen were not enough. After all, they came from a navy and were not good at close combat. As the alarm sounded, the overlord also woke up. Before the frogmen could reap their lives, the soldiers on the warship had already put on their armor and rushed out of the cabin. Even the sailors of the warship had picked up their weapons and joined battle. On every deck, in every corridor, in every room, a massacre was taking place. Under the light of the fire, the shadows of swords and sabers cast erratic shadows on the wall, like the long river of fate that no one could grasp. The Overlord's fierce counterattack immediately caused the frogman team responsible for clearing the cabins to suffer heavy losses. The order to gather at the top had been issued, but the frogmen could not leave. On the contrary, some of the Overlord city's navy broke through the defense line and began to gather on the top deck. The frogmen naturally wouldn't agree. Before they set off, they made a death oath in front of Junshan. If they didn't complete the task, they wouldn't go back alive. Both sides fought with their lives on the line, fighting for the passage to the top deck. In just 20 minutes, the small corridor changed hands several times, and the corpses piled up like a small hill. Blood soaked the deck and dripped onto the deck of the next floor. It was like an endless hell. The navy of both sides fought in such a way, and it was extremely tragic. At this time, the frogmen in charge of the periphery arrived in time and finally stabilized the situation. The frogmen team simply built simple fortifications at the entrance of the passage to resist the attack of the Overlord City's navy. Anyway, on the top deck, Shanghai City had the advantage in terms of military strength. The longer the battle dragged on, the more advantageous it was for Shanghai City. How could the Overlord City's navy not understand this? Their attacks became more and more frenzied. The good news was that the reinforcements from the surrounding warships moved quickly and had already smoothly entered the Overlord through the gangplank. Once the reinforcements kept coming, the entire decapitation operation would end in failure. The most crucial thing now was the battle on the top deck. The Divine Guards were worthy of being the strongest army in China. Even the powerful Imperial Guards of Overlord City were no match for the Divine Guards. Coupled with the cooperation of the Frogman team, the Imperial Guards were beaten back again and again. Seeing that they were no match, the Imperial Guards decisively abandoned the deck and retreated to the cabin. They began to fight a special street battle with the Divine Guards by relying on the passages, rooms, and other terrain. It had to be said that the Imperial Guard's choice was very smart. In a narrow passage, the Divine Guard's advantage in numbers could not be exerted at all. The 300 frogmen were completely reduced to bystanders and could only be responsible for rescuing the wounded in the rear. The battle was at a stalemate. At this time, Xiongba rushed out from the end of the passage with his guards. As soon as he arrived at the front line, Xiongba recognized the Divine Guards. The scarlet Divine Martial Cloak was too eye-catching. How can there be no clothes? It really is you. Xiongba's expression was strange. He seemed surprised, relaxed, and solemn. Originally, according to Xiongba's speculation, even if the other party was an army, there would not be more than 100 people. Who would have thought that the news that was reported left him dumbfounded? Xiongba could not imagine what kind of heaven-defying means the other party had used to quietly send more than 2,000 people into the water stockade. At that time, Xiongba broke out in a cold sweat. If not for the patrol member's accident, Xiongba might really have been silently assassinated by the Shanghai City Army in his bedroom. If that really happened, he would be disgraced if word got out. The difficult situation forced Xiongba to step forward and personally participate in the battle. If this dragged on, once the Imperial Guards were destroyed and the reinforcements did not arrive in time, it would be over. Xiongba was unusually valiant. He raised his broadsword and killed his way into the crowd. The 2-meter-long broadsword flashed coldly and drew a white light in the air. He raised the blade, and a divine guard's head immediately fell to the ground. Good. Xiongba's move immediately boosted the morale. With a thud, the head hit the ground and rolled a few times before landing at the feet of Wang Feng. Seeing this, Wang Feng's eyes turned bloodshot. He raised a spear and fought with Xiongba. Before setting off, every member had seen the portraits of Xiongba and Wolf Warrior. Therefore, Wang Feng immediately recognized that the person in front of him was his target. Good timing. Wang Feng's fighting spirit was aroused, and his blood was boiling. The two masters fought in the narrow passageway. Back and forth, it was very lively. The soldiers on both sides did not stay idle either. They each chose an opponent and fought in pairs. The only unexpected thing was that a captain of the Divine Guards quietly retreated from the passageway. The deck, which was bustling just a moment ago, suddenly became very deserted. The captain came to the passageway leading to the lower deck and observed the situation. He saw that the frogmen were fighting with the Overlord City Navy. Further away, more and more reinforcements were coming. The situation was getting more and more critical. The frogmen were about to lose. A trace of determination flashed in the captain's eyes. Without hesitation, he took out a signal flare and immediately sounded it. Whoosh! The signal flare streaked across the dark night sky like fireworks. Almost at the same time, more than 20 frogmen hiding in every corner of the Overlord looked up at the sky and silently stared at the fireworks that streaked across the sky in a beautiful arc and finally disappeared. The frogmen retracted their gaze and carefully took out a match from their arms. They looked devout, as if they were doing a very sacred thing. The fire lit up and the match was thrown into the fierce kerosene. In an instant, the fire soared and the deck was set ablaze. It was as if a fire dragon had suddenly come to life on the deck. In the sky, full of fire, the frogman took out the tang knife at his waist. A trace of relief flashed in his eyes as he muttered to himself, "Brothers, I'll go first." As he spoke, he raised the knife and slashed across his neck. Blood spurted out in a dazzling display. More than 20 nameless heroes fell just like that. They fell in a corner that no one paid attention to and were unknown to the public. Not good. The flagship is on fire. Go and put out the fire. Ah, help! Damn it. Where did the fire come from? The road ahead is blocked. Put out the fire first. The Overlord was suddenly in a mess. Some of the soldiers who came as reinforcements directly rushed into the sea of fire. Further away, seeing the flagship on fire, the entire water stockade was completely in trouble. Even the Lord, who was hiding in the corner and watching the show, panicked a little. What's going on? Why is it on fire? Looking at the fire, it seems to have been planned for a long time. It can't even be put out. A general on the side said. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and help put out the fire. The Lord was a little angry. If Xiongba really died like this, there would be a big problem. What were they going to do? They could just pack up and leave. Who could deal with a dragon like Shanghai City? Yes. The general hurried away. On the top deck, the tragic battle was still going on. Until now, Xiongba still did not realize that his flagship had fallen into a sea of fire. Until the billowing smoke from the fire at the bottom of the deck spread to the top floor through the cracks of the deck. What's going on? The Imperial Guards panicked. Before he could finish his words, the flames had already started to rise. Not good, there's a fire. The Imperial Guards were the first to react. Without saying anything, they immediately rushed to the front, ready to protect Xiongba and escape. The direction of escape was actually the depths of the passage. Where do you think you're going? Wang Feng shouted and immediately led his troops to chase. Looking at the light, there must be a secret escape route in the passage. Therefore, Wang Feng would not allow the other party to escape under his eyes no matter what. Cover the Lord. At the critical moment, the Imperial Guards and Imperial Guards showed a fearless spirit of sacrifice. One by one, they willingly covered the rear, buying time for Xiongba to retreat. Chapter 706. Crossbow. Seeing that Xiongba was about to escape, Wang Feng retaliated. The divine martial guards immediately threw away their weapons and took out their divine armed crossbows. They knocked an arrow and fired. The entire process was smooth and neat. It took less than half a minute. In a situation where there were no disturbances and in such a narrow passageway, there was no way to avoid the crossbow. Its destructive power was truly astonishing. The Imperial Guards responsible for bringing up the rear were like wheat, falling in rows, completely annihilated. Xiongba's Imperial Guards couldn't escape the same fate. The divine armed crossbows were too fast, and the divine martial guards were well trained. They were used to firing 3 times. The arrows that were shot out did not stop at all, and they continued to shoot without end. The passage was less than 100 meters long, and it became a nightmare for the Imperial Guards and Imperial Guards. When Xiongba's group reached the end of the passage, there were only a dozen Imperial Guards left. They were all injured. Luckily, they made it. It was unknown where the guard pressed, but the wooden wall at the end of the passageway slowly opened from both sides, revealing a narrow square space that looked like an elevator. Quick! The Imperial Guards protected Xiongba as they entered the elevator. It was actually a specially modified elevator. After they entered, the wooden wall closed again. Not good. Seeing this, Wang Feng's heart trembled. Without even thinking, he subconsciously exerted all his strength and threw the spear in his hand with all his might. Whoosh! Like a sharp arrow, the long spear pierced through the air and pierced into the elevator before the wooden wall was completely closed, emitting a wong-wong sound. The elevator came to an abrupt halt. This earth-shattering attack stunned the divine martial guards. Quick! Stop them! Wang Feng didn't hesitate. He pulled out the Tang sword and chased after them. The short 100 meters were covered in a blink of an eye. Wang Feng was giving his all. The divine martial guards also chased after them. Inside the elevator, everyone's faces were pale. The spear that Wang Feng threw hit the head of an Imperial Guard and stabbed into his skull. Brain juice splattered and blood gushed out. Such a thrilling and exciting scene caused the battle-hardened guards to be unable to withstand it. More importantly, because of the spear, the elevator couldn't close completely. Naturally, it couldn't operate smoothly and go down. Xiongba had specially hired top-notch craftsmen to modify the elevator. It led directly to the exit at the bottom of the cabin. There was even a small boat and emergency supplies at the exit. His goal was to escape at the critical moment. Xiongba's scheming mind was evident. Who could have imagined that Wang Feng's shocking attack would destroy it at the last moment? Wang Feng's spear was forged from refined iron and could not be sliced apart. If it tried to forcefully move the elevator, the spear that was stuck on the outside would slam into the ground and block the elevator. As such, Xiongba and the others had no way out. Xiongba's expression was complicated. In the end, he sighed. Since we can't retreat, let's fight to the death. Fight! 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 In a small space, more than a dozen guards burst out with monstrous battle intent. This was the final roar of a group of desperate people, bursting forth with all the potential in their bodies. If I can't leave, don't think you'll have it easy either. Xiongba's eyes were cold as he quietly clenched the long saber in his hands. Break the door down. Wang Feng had already brought the divine martial guards to the end of the passage. Yes, sir. The divine martial guards found hard metal tools from the room on the side and prepared to break the door. However, in the next moment, the wooden wall suddenly opened from the 2 sides. Under the leadership of Xiongba, the guards who had been waiting for a long time suddenly rushed out and caught the divine martial guards off guard. In an instant, the divine martial guards suffered heavy losses. Xiongba raised his long saber and went straight for Wang Feng's face, starting with a mountain-splitting strike. This move was powerful and condensed all of Xiongba's killing intent and determination. Once he attacked, there was no way out. As expected of an ambitious person, he was heroic at the critical moment. Wang Feng didn't dare to be slow and raised his saber to meet the attack. Clang! The long and thin saber was deflected by Xiong Ba's large saber. The large saber's momentum didn't decrease as it brought along a biting cold wind and flashed white rays towards Wang Feng's shoulder. This saber strike could probably split Wang Feng in half. General, the surrounding divine martial guards were shocked. They wanted to help, but it was too late. Wang Feng didn't panic. He gritted his teeth and forced his body to the side at the last moment. Pucci. Unfortunately, Wang Feng's reaction was a bit too late. The large saber almost touched Wang Feng's shoulder and cut his left arm in half. A forearm fell on the deck. Blood gushed out from the cut-off part of the arm. Even with Wang Feng's toughness, his face immediately turned pale and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. General, seeing this, the divine martial guards rushed forward. Xiong Ba wanted to follow up and finish Wang Feng in one move. At this moment, a sharp arrow pierced through the air and hit Xiong Ba's forehead. Ugh! Xiong Ba's movement paused. He looked at Wang Feng with regret and slowly fell down. The entire battlefield was silent. A moment later, Xiong Ba's body turned into a white light and disappeared from the map. Along with Xiong Ba, Overlord City's navy disappeared, including Overlord's navy that was still fighting with the frogmen. Even the few remaining guards were lucky enough to escape calamity, and they transformed into rays of light and left. Only the empty battleship proved that Overlord City's navy had been here. In a situation like this where the Lord was assassinated, the navy would be sent back to the main plane by Gaia, but the battleship they brought would not receive the same treatment and would remain on the map. Overlord City had suffered heavy losses in just one attack. General, the divine martial guards couldn't care less. They took some gauze and bandaged Wang Feng urgently. Wang Feng's expression was a little gloomy. He forced himself not to look at his broken left arm. He gritted his teeth and said, "Gather everyone and retreat before the battleship completely sinks." Yes, in the corner of the Wulin water stronghold, the Lord watched Overlord City's navy disappear. The Lord immediately understood what was going on. Damn it, Xiong Ba is really dead. The Lord's expression was extremely ugly. We can't stay in the Wulin water stronghold anymore. Without Overlord City's navy, they could not defend the Wulin water stronghold alone. Rather than that, it was better to rely on Battle Wolf and gather everyone to make a long-term plan. Just as the Lord decided to lead the fleet to the Red Cliff stronghold overnight, an urgent news made the Lord's face turn pale. "My lord, the Battle Wolf Lord has been stabbed to death." The Lord could not recover for a long time. After a long time, he said sadly, "Sun Lu's camp is finished." "My lord, what should we do now?" "Retreat. Leave the Red Cliff immediately." The Lord shuddered. Thinking of the Shanghai City Navy, he did not dare to stay here for even a moment. "Retreat to where?" "To Chaisang, to Sun Quan's place. That's the safest place now." The Lord still had foresight. Understood. Just like that, under the cover of the night, the remaining Red Cliff Navy fleet gathered and retreated to Chaisang in a sorry state. As time was tight, they did not even have time to receive the battleships left behind by Xiong Ba and Battle Wolf. The Lords were worried that if they delayed any longer, the Shanghai City Navy would come. That was a group of demons. Thinking of this, the Lords ran faster than rabbits. The bustling Red Cliff suddenly became empty and desolate. The sun rose, casting light on the surface of the river. Less than 10 miles away from the Red Cliff, hundreds of scarlet horseboats gathered together. On a scarlet horseboat in the middle, Wang Feng's face was pale as he listened to his subordinate's report. The more he listened, the more gloomy his face became. Attacking the Wulin water bandits, Shanghai City suffered heavy losses. The fighting and the fire took away the lives of more than 900 soldiers. In the end, less than 300 people survived. As for the group responsible for attacking the Red Cliff stronghold, it was even more tragic. The Battle Wolf army had extraordinary combat power. It was not easy for a group of wild wolves to fight to the death. Of the 1,200 soldiers, less than 100 came back alive. Even the commander of the army, the leader of the Lord's bodyguards, Chun Damong, sacrificed himself in the battle last night. According to the soldiers who escaped, the danger of the battle last night was no less than that of the Walin tribe. At the most intense moment, Chun Damong had to give the order to perish together with the enemy. It was in that battle that Chun Damong fiercely killed the battle wolf army while withstanding the enemy's bayonet. This battle could be said to be a Pyrrhic victory. Of the two valiant generals, one died in battle, and the other was crippled. When they set off, the 100 scarlet horseboats were filled to the brim. Everyone was excited and carefree, thinking about how to make a name for themselves on the battlefield. But now, the empty scarlet horseboats, even under the light of the morning sun, looked extremely desolate. The atmosphere at the scene was especially depressing. The soldiers were silent and sad, mourning for their dead brothers. Only the golden dragon flag was still fluttering in the wind, standing tall. "General, the scouts reported that the remaining enemies in the water bandits have retreated overnight. What should we do next?" The team leader asked Wang Feng for his opinion. Wang Feng's face was pale, and his body was extremely weak. Even so, his words were still powerful. "Arrange a frogman team to follow the fleeing enemies." "Understood. Arrange another team to report the situation here to the flagship." Wang Feng ordered. "General, don't worry. The messenger has already set off. If there are no accidents, the army should be able to reach the Red Cliff before nightfall." The team leader was obviously a capable person. "That's good." Wang Feng wanted to nod, but it was a little difficult. He continued, "Since the enemies have left, let's not stay on the river. Let's go into the water bandits to rest and wait for the Lord's arrival." "Yes." The soldier nodded. He hesitated for a moment, then asked, "General, your injury?" For General, losing an arm was like a bolt from the blue. From now on, a valiant general would have to retire from the battlefield and become a useless person. For a young general like Wang Feng, such a blow was fatal, a life worse than death. Chapter 707. "It's nothing, I'll just retire." Facing the captain's concern, Wang Feng smiled faintly and pretended to be relaxed. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the desperation, pain, and self-abandonment in Wang Feng's smile. The man in front of him was putting on a strong front. Seeing this, the captain silently turned his head away, not letting the general see the sympathy in his eyes. For a fierce general like Wang Feng, the last thing he needed was other people's sympathy. Alone, Wang Feng's right hand trembled uncontrollably, his nails digging into his flesh. In the evening, the Shanghai City fleet arrived at the Red Cliff. As soon as the warship docked at the Walin water stronghold, Ouyang Shuo went to see Wang Feng. Seeing Wang Feng's injuries, his expression was solemn, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable grief. Wang Feng was the one that Ouyang Shuo valued the most among the generals of Shanghai City. This meritorious general of Shanghai City had accompanied Ouyang Shuo in many battles for many years, achieving great achievements. Who would have thought that in the end, he would become a cripple? With Ouyang Shuo's keen senses, he immediately saw the death in Wang Feng's eyes. For a general like Wang Feng, he would rather die on the battlefield than live like this. Wang Feng was only able to hold on until now because of his duty. Seeing the ruler, Wang Feng's mind collapsed. His expression was dejected, and there was no life in his eyes. How could Ouyang Shuo not feel pain when he saw this? When he received the frogman's battle report in the morning, Ouyang Shuo lost his footing and staggered. In just this battle, Ouyang Shuo had lost his most loyal personal guard captain and gained a commander of the divine martial guard who was adept in battle. Such a blow made Ouyang Shuo unable to recover from it. In the war map, ordinary soldiers could use contribution points to revive, but for high-ranking generals, once they died, they would truly die, and there was no way to revive. What was worse was that historical generals could still use the martial temple to revive their souls. However, for a general like Chun Damong, who hadn't been promoted to a king-level general yet, his only path to resurrection had been blocked. In other words, Ouyang Shuo could no longer hear the guard captain's loud voice. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shuo strongly opposed the two of them going to war. These 2 days, Ouyang Shuo had been restless. He didn't expect the tragedy to happen. Now, seeing Wang Feng's expression, Ouyang Shuo felt as if a knife was stabbing into his heart. Ouyang Shuo looked at Wang Feng with a solemn expression and said word by word, "Listen, I won't allow you to commit suicide. You're the most outstanding general of Shanghai City to date. So even if you've lost an arm, you still have to live on like a warrior. I look forward to the day you step onto the battlefield again. Remember, don't let me look down on you." My lord. When Wang Feng heard this, he couldn't hold back his emotions. He grabbed the corner of Jun Shang's clothes tightly as tears flowed from his eyes. The Iron Bone Man was crying like a child. When the surrounding soldiers saw this, they were all moved. At this moment, no one was laughing at Wang Feng. They were only moved by the camaraderie between ruler and subject. Even Jia Su, who was at the side, couldn't help but be moved. Jia Su had never thought that this young sovereign king would have such charm. Ouyang Shuo's eyes flashed with a trace of tears, but he held them back in the end. He gently patted Wang Feng's head and emotionally said, "Recuperate well." At this point, Ouyang Shuo was speechless. He allowed a long sigh and left. When the soldiers saw this, they left together to let Wang Feng recuperate and calm his emotions. This night was destined to be a sleepless one. The fleet had just arrived at the Red Cliff, and there were many things that Ouyang Shuo needed to decide. However, Ouyang Shuo had locked himself in his study early in the morning, and no one dared to disturb him. Fortunately, there were Zheng He and Jia Su, the two of them handling things, so there was finally no trouble. The next morning, the sun rose in the east. When Ouyang Shuo woke up again, he had abandoned all his weakness and returned to being the sovereign king who looked down on the world. Guards! Ouyang Shuo was about to summon Zheng He and Jia Su to discuss the next step. My lord, a tall and thin soldier walked in. When he saw that the person who came was not the familiar tall figure, a trace of disappointment flashed in Ouyang Shuo's eyes. The person who temporarily replaced Chun Dameng was the deputy captain of his personal guard. Ouyang Shuo calmed himself down and said lightly, "Ask Governor Zheng and Mr. Jiasu to come." "Yes. Dragon Head, War Room. Tell me, what should we do next?" Ouyang Shuo sat upright in the seat of honor, seemingly indifferent as he looked at the two capable assistants in the hall. By now, Jiasu had completely integrated into the team. Ouyang Shuo was no longer courteous with Jiasu and directly consulted him if there was anything. He was already using Jiasu as a subordinate strategist. Seeing this, Jiasu could only smile bitterly. According to the report from the Scarlet Horseboat, the enemy's Huanggai army has already joined forces with the Guanyu Navy to go down the river. They will arrive at the Red Cliff in a few days. Zheng He first reported the latest military situation. They are really courting death. Ouyang Shuo smiled and shook his head. The Huanggai army, which was not equipped with cannons, did not enter Ouyang Shuo's eyes. Do you think they know that the Red Cliff has already fallen? In this beheading operation, the actual number of enemies killed was very few, and Ouyang Shuo's contribution points basically did not increase. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo dared to conclude that the other feudal lords would not be able to find any clues from the contribution points list, unless they had other means of communication. According to the situation observed by the spy, they should not know. This army did not stop at all. They have been traveling day and night and are rushing towards the Red Cliff at top speed. Zheng He smiled as he explained. That's good. Ouyang Shuo nodded. As for how to deal with them, the two of you can come up with your own battle plan. I only have one request. Do your best to capture Huanggai and Guanyu alive. Understood. To Zheng He and Jia Su, this was not a difficult task. Jia Su brought up another matter. My lord, I speculate that the enemy troops retreating from the Red Cliff are preparing to go to the Chaising Mulberry Tree to seek refuge with Sun Quan. Therefore, my suggestion is to immediately arrange for an army to chase after them and eliminate them at their roots, so as not to alarm the Chaising Mulberry Tree. Mr. Suggestion is correct. Ouyang Shuo agreed with Jia Su's judgment. He turned to look at Zheng He. Arrange for a naval battalion to set off immediately, regardless of life or death. Yes. Zheng He did not hesitate either. What Ouyang Shuo was truly interested in was why Liu Bei had led an army here. Jiasu could guess the reason. He smiled and said, Liu Bei seems to be a righteous person, but in reality, he is mean and selfish. I'm afraid he is still busy taking care of Changsha County. It had to be said that Jiasu's eyes were truly sharp. He saw through Liu Bei at first glance. Ouyang Shuo deeply agreed. He said seriously, that won't do. Mister, think of a way to lure that old fox Liu Bei out. Don't let him hole up in his nest forever. Among the players in the China region, perhaps only Ouyang Shuo knew what kind of important role Liu Bei would play in the wilderness in the future. Moreover, this role was very likely to come into conflict with Shanghai City at some point in the future. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo wanted to use this opportunity to make Liu Bei lose a layer of skin. If he really went to the main plain, it would not be so easy to deal with Liu Bei. As for subduing Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, and the other generals, Ouyang Shuo had no interest in that. After Guan Yu passed away, his titles were conferred again and again, from Guangong, Second Master Guan, to Emperor Guan. It was only until the Qing dynasty that Guan Yu replaced Yu Fei and became a warrior saint on par with Confucius. Ouyang Shuo couldn't help but scoff at this. Throughout the 5,000 years of China, the warrior saint, who could truly stand on par with Confucius, was neither Yu Fei nor Guan Yu. It was only Jiang Shang. The Manchus of the Qing dynasty conferred the title of warrior saint on Guan Yu to replace Yu Fei. This was because Yu Fei was a famous general who fought against the Jin dynasty and was a hero who resisted foreign invasions. As such, it naturally stung the sensitive nerves of the people. How could they tolerate Yu Fei sitting on the altar? Guan Yu, who was portrayed in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, was naturally the best candidate to replace Yu Fei. As for the real Guan Yu in history, he was just a brawny warrior. Guan Yu's biography in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms was less than 1,000 words. It was not worth mentioning at all. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Guan Yu killed Hua Xiong while drinking wine. In history, Hua Xiong was killed by the fierce tiger of Jiangdong, Sun Jian. It had nothing to do with Guan Yu. Apart from that, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms also made up stories such as overcoming 5 passes and killing 6 generals and drowning 7 armies. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Guan Yu beheaded Yin Liang and executed Wen Chou. But in reality, Wen Chou was not killed by Guan Yu. He died in the famous Battle of Guandu. In order to highlight Guan Yu's Gao Da Quan image, Luo Guanzhong put all these impressive achievements under Guan Yu's name to show off his bravery and resourcefulness. Guan Yu in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms was a typical example of Confucianism's benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. However, a close reading of the biography of Guan Yu would reveal that Guan Yu was extremely lacking in political acumen. This could be seen from one incident. Guan Yu did not understand the importance of allying with Wu to fight against Cao Cao. When he was in Jingzhou, he rejected Sun Quan's marriage proposal. Moreover, his attitude was very unfriendly. He insulted the envoy who proposed. How can my son be a match for the tiger girl? As a result, he offended Dong Yuwu. Everyone was familiar with the story after that. After Sun Quan conquered Jingzhou, he killed Guan Yu and his son in Linju. The alliance between Sun and Lu was completely broken. It could be said that it was Guan Yu's stubbornness and arrogance that ruined the future of Shu Han. In addition, Guan Yu was also arrogant and looked down on Ma Chao, Huang Zhong, and the others who were part of the 5 tiger generals. Liu Bei proclaimed himself the Prince of Hanzhong and appointed Guan Yu as the former general. When Guan Yu heard that Huang Zhong was appointed as the rear general, he was very angry and said, "A real man will never be on the same level as a veteran." His attitude was extremely arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo was not the least bit interested in such a Guan Yu. In comparison, Zhang Fei, who was said to have a fiery temperament, was brave and reckless, and hated evil as if it was his personal enemy, was more acceptable to Ouyang Shuo. This was because the real Zhang Fei in history was not only not a brute, but on the contrary, he was skilled in both the pen and the sword. Chapter 708. In the combat room, the discussion continued. Jia Su smiled and said, "My lord wishes to have Liu Bei attack. Guan Yu is a very good breakthrough point." Ouyang Shua's eyes lit up when he heard that. Guan and Zhang were Liu Bei's Achilles heel. Liu Bei valued his two brothers greatly. If something were to happen to Guan Yu, Ouyang Shua did not believe that Liu Bei would be able to hold himself back. Then, for tomorrow's battle, all of you have to plan well. Ouyang Shua issued a military order. "Lord, please rest assured." Zhang Yi took the opportunity to introduce the battle plan he had discussed with Jia Su, and Ouyang Shua approved of it. After a while, the two of them bid farewell and left to make the final preparations for tomorrow's battle. Cloud Dream Great Swamp. Just as Ouyang Shua was preparing to kill Huanggai, Zhou Yu's army was only a day's journey away from River Tomb City. A long-planned war was about to begin, and it might even reverse the entire situation of the Battle of Chibi. After all, Jiangling was the main battlefield of the Battle of Red Cliffs, where more than 90% of the forces from both sides were gathered. The success or failure of this battle would, to a large extent, determine the success or failure of the entire campaign. After receiving the information, the atmosphere in Jiangling City became tense. Cao Cao personally guarded Jiangling. Cao Run, Eugene, Cao Chun, Wen Pin, and the other generals were all in position, each guarding a direction. Cao Cao's 200,000-strong mutant army had also received orders to station themselves in Jiangling City. The entire River Tomb City instantly turned into a huge military camp. Rations and fodder gathered from all over the Jing province were transported to River Tomb City day and night for the army's consumption. After receiving the news that Lu Su's army had been annihilated, Cao Cao's ambition was rekindled. He was determined to fight against the allied forces of Sun and Lu in Jiangling to wipe out the Jiangdong army. After a few days of rest and the encouragement of the Navy's great victory, the morale of the Cao army had risen. Therefore, Cao Cao was very confident in this battle. Jiangling City, Mutant Army Encampment. Inside the tent, south of rosy clouds suppressed her excitement and said with a smile, "Zifong is really a godly person, able to predict things like a deity. We acted according to your plan, and Chaoren really agreed." Seeing this, Zhang Liang smiled without saying a word. Seeing that his lord was so excited, a trace of helplessness flashed across Zhang Liang's eyes. Zhang Liang sighed in his heart. Stubbornly sticking to the Tao is not the style of a king. South of rosy clouds was still excited, and she didn't notice the strange look on her top advisor's face at all. She was immersed in the fantasy of victory. This time, I must make the League of Mountains and Seas suffer a big loss. On the 13th day of the battle, at the red cliffs of the Yangtze River, a huge fleet was sailing on the river, stretching for several miles. On the warships, huge military flags were hung. The front half had the word Huang, while the back half had the word Guan. This fleet was the combined army of Huanggai and Guan Yu. Following Liu Bei's orders, Guan Yu led 4,000 naval troops as the vanguard. The army hurried and finally met up with Huanggai's army before they reached the Red Cliffs. Unfortunately, after the previous conflict, Huanggai was not interested in Guan Yu's arrival. Guan Yu was an arrogant man. He did not want to send out his troops this time. It was Liu Bei who pressured him to do so. Seeing Huanggai's attitude, Guan Yu became even more unhappy. The main army did not regroup with Huanggai's army and followed behind. The two armies were separated by at least 1,000 meters. Just as the Scarlet Horseboat had discovered, Huanggai did not know that the Red Cliffs had changed owners. The main army arrived at the waterway in front of the Red Cliffs. They did not stop and continued advancing. Along the way to the Red Cliffs, they did not see a single warship. Huanggai was not surprised by this. Huanggai and Lu Su knew about the ambush tactics of the Yin-Huang alliance. Therefore, when Huanggai saw that the Wulin water stronghold was still in ruins, he did not think much of it. especially since they had not encountered a single battleship along the way. This was part of the plan. The goal was to not attract the attention of Cao Cao's army. After entering the Red Cliffs, Huang stood on the deck and said with a smile, "We finally arrived. Sound the drums and inform the mutant army that we have arrived as reinforcements. Quickly open the gates of the water stronghold." Yes. The messenger turned and left. Throughout the entire process, only the siege lion, who was standing beside Huang had a strange expression on his face. Sometimes, being too normal was abnormal. After spending so much time with Ouyang Shuo, the siege lion had some understanding of his big brother's character. Ouyang Shuo liked to plan before taking action. He would never fight a battle he was not confident of winning. The siege lion was already worried that they did not see the Shanghai City fleet along the way. When they saw the strange situation at the Red Cliffs, the uneasiness in the siege lion's heart intensified. However, out of consideration, the siege lion did not tell Huang about his worries. When the gates of the water stronghold opened and a large number of warships sailed out from the Wulin and Red Cliffs, the siege lion was almost certain that they had fallen into a trap. Although all the high-end warships in the China region came from the Shanghai City shipyard and looked exactly the same, the siege lion had a strong feeling that the other party was the Shanghai City fleet. The fleets on both sides sailed out of the water stronghold and formed a formation on the river. In an instant, Huang and Guan Yu's allied forces were sandwiched on the river, unable to move. Is there a need for such a grand, welcoming ceremony? Huang was a little confused. His general's intuition told him that something was wrong. Unfortunately, it was too late. On the warships on both sides, dazzling golden dragon flags were raised, fluttering in the wind on the river. Shouts rang out at the same time. "Those on the other side, listen up. You have been surrounded. Surrender now." Not good. Huang expression became extremely ugly. "Attack, attack quickly." Huang was brave and did not think of surrendering at all. The archers reacted quickly, hurriedly took out their bows and arrows, and attacked the warships on both sides. Unfortunately, all of this was destined to be in vain. As soon as the rain of arrows rose, the cannons on both sides fired in unison. At such a short distance, Huang and Guan Yu's army were sandwiched from both sides and had no room to maneuver strategically. Countless pitch-black cannons were aimed at them. Just the first round of cannons caused the fleet to suffer heavy losses. Under Zheng He's command, only the two flagships were intact. This round of cannons directly stunned Huang and his heart turned cold. Huang finally understood why the powerful Lu Su army was completely annihilated. "Those on the other side, listen up. Surrender now, or don't blame the cannons for being merciless." The shouts continued. After the baptism of cannons, the weight of this shout was especially heavy. Huang army and Guan Yu's army were immediately in an uproar. The generals and soldiers were not fools. They had already seen that there was no chance of winning this battle. If they continued to resist, only death awaited them. At this moment, whether to surrender or not was no longer up to Huang and Guan Yu. Even if they did not agree, the generals and soldiers would surrender of their own accord. Perhaps they would even tie the two of them up and take credit for it. Huang face was deathly pale, and his heart was like dead ashes. Guan Yu's red jujube face became even redder, as if he was being branded by iron. There were no surprises in the battle that followed. After a series of twists and turns, the two armies completely surrendered and were easily taken down by the Shanghai City fleet. The entire process did not take more than an hour. There is no doubt that this was the easiest battle for Shanghai City. They could only blame Huang and the others for being too careless. On the top deck of the Dragonhead, Huang Guan Yu, and the others were escorted here by the divine martial guards to be handed over to the emperor. Mixed in the crowd was also the siege lions. The two were originally allies, but now they had become prisoners. Even the siege lions, as open-minded as they were, felt somewhat ashamed. Ouyang Shuo was considerate and did not say anything. He first arranged for people to send the siege lions down to rest. Then, Ouyang Shuo looked at Guan Yu. When they captured Guan Yu, They lost more than 50 divine martial guards. No matter what, Guan Yu was a first-class general with extraordinary combat strength. In order to avoid more casualties, the divine martial guards had no choice but to use the divine crossbow to subdue Guan Yu. Thus, Guan Yu's body was covered in wounds. There were no less than 5 arrowheads. Even so, Guan Yu did not even frown. Although this person was stubborn and arrogant, he had the ability to be arrogant. Just based on this point, Guan Yu could be considered a good man. However, many times, a good man was not the same as a good general. Guan Yu, are you willing to surrender? Ouyang Shuo looked straight at Guan Yu. Guan Yu raised his head, his eyes filled with killing intent. Coupled with his blood energy, it was truly frightening. If it was a scholar standing in front of Guan Yu, he might not even be able to stand steadily. Unfortunately, who was Ouyang Shuo? He had fought countless battles and seen all kinds of storms. Thus, Guan Yu's killing intent had no effect on Ouyang Shuo at all. His expression was calm. Guan Yu was also a bit surprised, but he didn't take it to heart. He glanced at Ouyang Shuo, as if it was beneath him to answer Ouyang Shuo's question. He spat out a mouthful of phlegm with an arrogant expression. How dare you? The divine martial guards were immediately scared and placed their blades on Guan Yu's neck. Guan Yu snorted coldly. He did not mind the Tang saber on his neck at all. He said sternly, "Kill me or cut me up. Do as you wish. You want me to surrender? Dream on." "Good, you have guts." Ouyang Shuo smiled and clapped. In the next second, his expression turned cold, and he said indifferently, "In that case, drag him away and behead him." The speed at which he changed his expression was unparalleled. "Yes, sir." The divine martial guards had long disliked Guan Yu. In order to capture this person, they had lost many brothers. Guan Yu snorted again. The attentive Ouyang Shuo noticed that Guan Yu's fingers on his right hand unconsciously trembled. Ouyang Shuo smiled inwardly. It seemed that Guan Yu was not really unafraid of death. If Guan Yu thought that he would be courteous to him like Chow Chow, then he was gravely mistaken. A moment later, Guan Yu's head was placed in a wooden box and sent back to the deck. Ouyang Shuo saw it and said to Zheng He, "Arrange for Guan Yu's head to be sent to Liu Bei's army." Understood. Liu Bei would definitely flip out when he saw this head. Jiasu couldn't help but be shocked by Ouyang Shuo's decisiveness. That was Guan Yu, an existence whose name shook the 3 kingdoms. He killed him without batting an eye. Chapter 709. Huang Gai was the most shocked by Guan Yu's death. The trussed-up Huang Gai's face grew darker when he saw Guan Yu's head. The inhuman overlord before him was truly merciless. He killed without batting an eyelid. Huang Gai was worried that he would be asked, "Are you willing to surrender?" If he shook his head would roll to the ground. Even a veteran like Huang Gai couldn't take it anymore. He was ready to surrender. As long as there's life, there's hope. Huang Gai did not want to end up like Guan Yu, who had his head chopped off cleanly. Unexpectedly, Ouyang Shuo didn't ask whether Huang Gai surrendered or not. Instead, he smiled and said apologetically, "Lu Su and the others are currently being held in prison. Old General, I'll have to trouble you to stay with them for now." Ouyang Shuo cupped his hand slightly. When Huang Gai saw this, he felt a chill run down his spine. This person's face-changing technique was truly one of the best in the world. He'd just beheaded Guan Yu, and now he was putting on an act of respecting the wise. Even so, Huang Gai was inwardly pleased. He and Guan Yu were both prisoners of war, but the difference in treatment was like heaven and earth. Didn't this mean the Huang Gai was more favored? It had to be said that the ancients were very fond of respecting the wise. Huang Gai heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and his anxious heart finally calmed down a little. It seemed that they'd escaped for the time being. Lu Su and the others were still alive. Huang Gai's despairing thoughts were instantly revived. 20 minutes later, Huang Gai met Lu Su, Lu Meng, Zhou Tai, and Gan Ning in the Dragon Head prison. The 5 generals looked at each other, then at each other. In the end, they could only smile wryly. The River East Navy had been wiped out in one fell swoop. The 5 of them were brothers in the same boat. The appearance of the cannons taught Lu Meng and the other generals a vivid lesson. In the face of such a great killing weapon, they had almost no ability to fight back. Their defeat was inevitable. I wonder how the war is going on with the governor, Lu Su sighed. They've been treated like honored guests for the past few days. Unfortunately, the defeated generals weren't in the mood to enjoy themselves. They've been worrying about the war in the River East. When he saw Huang Gai, he was even more worried. Zhou Yu's army was the only turning point. Don't worry, the governor is a godly man. He'll crush that traitor. Gan Ning was Zhou Yu's biggest fan. I hope so. Lu Su wasn't as optimistic as Gan Ning. He was keenly aware that the mutants were the main characters in this battle. The direction of the war was no longer dictated by the will of the natives. In fact, this was the norm in later battles. In the second half of the third year of Gaia, the overlords of the wilderness that gradually rose to power were about to wield greater authority. The Battle of Chibi was a watershed. The Inhuman army far outnumbered the natives, so they naturally wouldn't be at the mercy of the natives. The Chibi ambush was planned by Xiongba and the others from the very beginning. After that, he just went through the formalities and informed Zhou Yu, Lu Su, Huang Gai, and the others. He didn't ask for their opinions at all. As the battle progressed, Lu Su and Huang Gai had to cooperate with the mutant army and rush to Chibi. As a result, the ambush that Xiongba and the rest of them had carefully designed came to an abrupt halt in Shanghai City's unconventional decapitation operation before it was carried out. Lu Su, Huang Gai, and the rest of them were also trapped. If the plot had continued, even Liu Bei would have fallen into the trap. The natives had been in a passive position throughout the entire process. They could no longer control the overall situation. They could no longer act as they had in previous battles, where the mutant army could only support them. Even the impending battle of Jiangling was the same. The decisive battle was actually a confrontation between the mutant armies. Be it Zhou Yu from Sun Lu's camp or Cao Cao from Cao Cao's camp. All of them played the role of a commander. At this moment, Zhou Yu had no choice but to attack Jiangling. Di Chun could command the mutant army and attack Jiangling on his own. To tell the truth, Di Chun didn't think much of Zhou Yu's army of tens of thousands. This was the helplessness of the natives. Zhou Yu and the others had been coerced. In a sense, Cao Cao's agreement to resist Zhou Yu's army at Jiangling was also the result of Ouyang Shua's influence. Even without Xiahou Ying, Ouyang Shua had other ways to achieve his goal. The mutant representatives on the battle map were becoming more and more prominent. This was the embryonic form of a future leader. Of course, the prerequisite was that the mutant representatives had enough prestige among the lords participating in the battle. Whether it was Ouyang Shua or Di Chun, both of them obviously fulfilled this condition. The only hidden danger was that Cao Cao's mutant army was without a leader after Ouyang Shua left Jiangling. With the interference of South of Rosy Clouds and the others, the situation had become even more complicated. Both Baiwa and Feng Xiaohuang were unable to control the situation. This was something that Ouyang Shua had overlooked. Even if Ouyang Shua had thought of it, he had no other way. If Ouyang Shua wasn't there to oversee the battle at Dajiang, Zheng He and Jia Su, who were unfamiliar with each other, would have been unable to predict what would have happened. Dragon Head, War Room. Zheng He and Jia Su were in charge of the aftermath, so there was no need for Ouyang Shua to worry. After sending off Huang Gai, Ouyang Shua met with the siege line alone. The atmosphere was somewhat awkward the moment they met. Big brother. The siege lion hesitated. Ouyang Shua glanced at the siege lion and said frankly, "You chose Sun Lu's camp. To be honest, I didn't expect this before the battle started." Big brother this. The siege lion wanted to explain. Ouyang Shua waved his hand. "You don't need to explain. I've already said that it's up to you to choose which camp you want. I won't interfere. The only thing I'm unhappy about is, why didn't you inform me beforehand?" Ouyang Shua was the leader of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. He was their big brother. The siege lion and the others had chosen different camps. They should have informed Ouyang Shua in advance so that he could be prepared. Otherwise, Ouyang Shuo wouldn't have been caught off guard. When he was in Jiangling, Ouyang Shuo could clearly feel that Feng Qiuhuang, Baiwa, and the others were dissatisfied with the sieging lion and the seeking dragon acupoint master. This was what Ouyang Shuo didn't want to see. The siege lion was clearly stunned. A trace of guilt flashed across his face. He sincerely apologized. "Big brother, I was wrong." His careless personality had once again caused trouble for the team. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. It was as if he was answering the siege lion, but also as if he was talking to himself. "You're not the only one who was wrong. These few years, we've been walking further and further on the road of power. I'm afraid we've already lost ourselves. Being addicted to power, indulging in ambition, and having an inflated ego, these are all sins. Since we've committed a sin, we have to bear it." These words were indeed spoken from Ouyang Shuo's heart. The rebellion of the Seeking Dragon Acupoint was not like what Ouyang Shuo had shown. It didn't affect him much. These thoughts had always been hidden in Ouyang Shuo's heart. Only when he saw the siege lion did Ouyang Shuo express his feelings. "Big brother." The siege lion's eyes turned red from Ouyang Shuo's words. "Do you still remember how frivolous we were back then? Do you still remember the promise we made back then?" Thinking of this, the siege lion immediately couldn't control his emotions. His eyes instantly became moist, and all the emotions he had accumulated burst out. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo remained silent. The large guest room was immersed in a sorrowful atmosphere. Two people with power faced their hearts and touched the forbidden area that they didn't want to touch the most. Inside the forbidden area, it was a bloody and miserable scene. To Ouyang Shuo, this was a rare experience. Until now, Ouyang Shuo couldn't clearly say how much of the reason he roped in the Seeking Dragon Acupoint experts was because of friendship, and how much of it was because of benefits. In his previous life, from the moment he was betrayed by his big brother Song Pu, the two-faced Azura, who believed in brotherhood, had already died. What was left was a soul that no longer trusted. This soul was like a lonely ghost that wandered in the desolate depths of his heart. In this life, Ouyang Shuo could whitewash his brotherhood. He could disguise it as family, and he could embellish it with love. But in the end, he couldn't escape his endless pursuit of power and ambition. Perhaps only supreme power could make Ouyang Shuo feel a trace of security. That kind of Ouyang Shuo was the real Ouyang Shuo. Taking off the gorgeous clothes, what was left was only a miserable soul, a soul that staked everything on one throw, a soul that was no longer complete. At the same time, it was also a lonely soul. The only thing that didn't change was the affection he had for Bing Er. This purest familial affection became the only fulcrum that supported Ouyang Shuo step by step until now. Because of its pureness, there was no need to whitewash it, which made it even more powerful. Some people said that every ruler who strives forward has a base in their heart, which is the source of all their power. The base in Ouyang Shuo's heart was this unchanging protection. However, such a base was obviously not complete. The trauma of the betrayal in his previous life had not really been healed with the passage of time. There was always such a knot in Ouyang Shuo's heart. Until today, Ouyang Shuo was shocked to find that this knot had quietly grown into his inner demon. If he didn't get rid of the inner demon, it would be difficult to become a true expert. It seems that after the war, I have to find time to completely cut off the inner demon of my previous life, Ouyang Shuo thought. In the 3 years of playing the game, Ouyang Shuo seemed to have unconsciously and deliberately avoided contact with the Yangshan mercenary group. This was the inner demon. It was a subtle and silent influence. Ouyang Shuo glanced at the siege lion opposite him. It had grown up after all. It quickly collected its emotions and didn't really cry in front of Ouyang Shuo. Speaking of which, Ouyang Shuo really had to thank this little brother today. Otherwise, the deeper the inner demon was, the more terrifying it would be when it completely broke out one day. P.S. Sheng Xiao's WeChat official account has been opened. Search for Sheng Xiao Swordsman on the official account to add him. It will constantly update various settings, gossip, and news, etc., asking for attention asking for fans that you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.